to start this podcast you've been talking about for like forever.
Do you think that anyone will actually want to listen to something like this?
What is your plan for an introduction?
Are you sure you want to talk about these topics? People usually disagree.
3 hours? Are you crazy?
Do you think you're some kind of expert or something?
Are you planning to have an intro song?
What if a bunch of people get really mad and hate you over this?
Do you even know how to make a podcast?
Are you just doing this because you like to argue with people?
Don't let this be just one more thing that you talk about doing, but never actually do.
Wouldn't it be better to do just one episode for each topic?
Stop trying to change people's opinions. Just live your own life.
Dude, people are never gonna agree. Just let it go.
Is this going to be a long intro? Because if it is, I'm bored already.
Hey guys, welcome to episode 3 of the Why Can't We Talk About That podcast. This week, my guest is Colby Lippincott. Our discussion is a little more theological than the others have been thus far, as he and I share many of the same core spiritual beliefs. However, there are some things that we disagree on, and on certain subjects, Colby takes a different viewpoint than most Christians and Bible believers would. In this episode, we discuss the music of Switchfoot, Towrs, Five Iron Frenzy, Strahan, and Pillar. We also discuss Christian music in general, questioning our faith, whether or not Christians hate people, religious politicians, Donald Trump, Joe Biden, racist assumptions, racial profiling, the appearance of evil, dressing the part, violent words, the soul, miracles, hell, and the evidence for Christianity. Colby definitely challenged me in a few things and has pushed me to do some digging. Hopefully this episode will do the same for you. Enjoy the conversation. I clicked record, dude. I did it.
Oh no.
Now we're live, man.
Right.
So how you doing, man? Thanks for coming. Appreciate it. You good? It's awesome, dude.
Yeah.
Still new at this, so it's not, I'm not the best at it, but it's fun. I enjoy the conversations.
You just kind of try and ignore the microphone and.
Yes, it's not there. It's not.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
you should put little like plants over it, so it's like
it's disguised like they do with those where they do those cell phone towers, where they try to make it look like trees. And my kids are always like,
so convincing.
That doesn't even look like a tree. It's like it's so obviously not a tree,
I know they could definitely do a better job with those.
Yeah,
things. It's
so
pretty ridiculous.
Very cool. Well, I see you wore a music shirt today.
I did. So I actually made this like last week.
Oh wow. So there's some of your favorite bands on there?
Yeah, there's like all my favorite bands on a t-shirt.
Did you see Switchfoot just played in Vina Robles? Did you guys go?
No, I didn't go.
Oh, you missed it, man. Well,
I mean, you have kids too.
I do. Yeah, I just leave them on the side of the road somewhere. Of course, mine are older than yours, so.
It's like, I'm not paying for you to get in.
Actually, that's true. My kids Addie probably would enjoy Switchfoot show. I don't know. Asher gets kind of bored at concerts because he's not quite old enough yet, but the kids might have enjoyed it. Who knows?
Yeah.
But. Anyway, so of all those, let's see, what have I heard of? We got Vampire Weekend, Switchfoot. Is that Strahan?
Yeah.
Okay.
Strahan.
Ocellos, Towrs.
Oholos. This is a fancy H.
Oh, gotcha.
Towrs and Reliant K.
Okay,
Yeah.
so of those bands, I have only heard of 3,
right?
And I've only heard the music of 2. Can you guess which ones?
Switchfoot, obviously.
Yep.
Reliant K.
Yep.
And Vampire Weekend?
Yeah. Those are 3 I've heard. Which 2 do you think I've listened to?
I think you've listened to Switchfoot and Reliant K.
Yeah, I've heard them. I have most of their catalog, so I do really enjoy those 2 bands. I've never seen either one live, which is a bummer because I know Switchfoot even played here at Pacific Christian one time.
I know. They were at Santa Barbara Bowl.
Oh, really?
Once, yeah.
Okay. Yeah,
missed them though.
I've always wanted to see Switchfoot. It's kind of funny. Have you've heard of Five Iron Frenzy? So that's ska band. So that's one of my favorite bands of all time. And they have when they broke up, they had a DVD come out that was like, I think it's called The Rise and Fall of Five Iron Frenzy. But they have all this concert footage and stuff. and they were showing this young band called Switchfoot, right? And they're just like, and it's a joke now because like they're putting out the DVD like years later, right? And they're making a joke, and they're like, yeah, these guys would always open for us, and for some reason the crowd just never really got into them, right? And it's a joke now, right? Because obviously Switchfoot is way bigger than Five Iron ever was, you know?
Yeah.
So it's just kind of funny, but he's like, we really dig these guys, and they're from San Diego, and they go on tour with us, but
that's funny.
Most of the time the crowd's not really into him, and then it's just like it's just kind of funny, you never know. But
I guess I mean some of their first albums weren't like I still have some of the first albums, but they weren't like great or like catchy. I still think they're good, but just not catchy.
I think I first was turned on, or who are we talking about? Switchfoot?
Switchfoot, yeah.
So I was first turned on to them, I think, Learning to Breathe. Is that the name of the album or the song?
It might.
It had like A New Way to Be Human and Learning to Breathe.
I think
there was a bunch of singles on there.
I think the album's called A New Way to Be Human.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
But yeah.
And I think that was like their second, maybe their third album. But of course, everybody knew who they were when Beautiful Letdown came out with was it Dare You to Move. And what was the other?
Vice Versa.
Yeah. There was a huge single off of Beautiful Letdown. It wasn't Dare You to Move. It was the other one. I'm drawing a blank. I hate that. I hate when that happens. I have to come in later and edit and see
the
song I was thinking of was.
You could always look it up. It'd just be like dead silence.
Yeah. Well, we've done that.
I'm looking things up.
Oh yeah. Well, we've done that. I did one the other day where we had to, the dog was going crazy, and I had to. We're gonna have to edit that out and bunch it along. That's the beauty of it, I guess, is it not being live. just edit it out whenever.
Oh, you fooled me. I thought it was live.
Yeah. No.
See the comments. No.
Yeah. It's going live to all the listeners that don't even know it exists. So Switchfoot. Then, what would you say? Would you consider that one of your favorite bands of all time, or?
I would say I liked them a lot more before, when I was younger.
Okay.
Yeah.
Like in the early days, meaning that you've matured as a person, and you don't care for the music as much, or that their music has gotten worse in your opinion.
No. I think their music is great. I just think I've grown to like other bands more.
Okay.
Just because Switchfoot is it has it's a lot of faster music. Mm-hmm. Some of the lyrics to me don't make so much sense in a lot of the songs. Right. And I think that's what I really look for in bands is like
you're more of a lyric person than
I'm very much a lyric person. Okay. So I want the lyrics to make sense, to have a complete thought behind it, and make some kind of impact. Okay. I liked when lyrics kind of build into a main idea in the song and really hit home on that idea. Mm-hmm. So I would say Switchfoot has some really good thought-provoking lyrics, a few Dare You to Move. Right. If you really think about that song when you're listening to it, it does kind of get you to move.
Right.
But there's a lot. It's almost like a string of one-liners. A lot of songs are like that. It's like a string of different individual thoughts. Right. And it doesn't seem to flow too well.
Yeah, see, for me, very rarely, I love lyrics too, but very rarely do I understand them. A lot of the times, a lot of the bands and the singers that I like, they're so they're too poetic for me. Right. They're they go over my head, Right. But even then, sometimes something about the words affects me.
Yeah.
That if you were to ask me, well, what does the song even mean? I have no idea.
Right.
But for some reason, it makes me, when I hear those words and the way they're sung and the music that goes with it, it makes me feel a certain way. There's a lot of songs that make me feel nostalgic for the old days, and sometimes the lyrics have nothing to do with the old days.
Right,
it's just it's kind of a weird thing, and I don't know what that is, but
it's like they're getting across the the idea behind the lyrics more than what the lyrics mean themselves. You know, it's I think. And I like that, but when it gets too out there, and you're and you read into it a little bit more, and you're like, I really don't know what they meant by this at all.
Right.
And then some artists will be like, yeah, I didn't even know what I was writing.
Yeah, well, like
What's wrong with you?
like John Lennon's famous for that, right? Like they would ask him like, what does this even mean? And sometimes in an interview he'd try to be like, oh, and he'd come up with something on the spot or whatever. But in reality, he's like, I don't know, I just wrote it, Or I remember when I was in high school, a lot of the kind of the grunge kids were just thought Kurt Cobain was the greatest lyricist of all time, and I would kind of call him out. And don't get me wrong, I love Nirvana. I mean, I love Nirvana, but to try to pretend like he was actually writing words that made any sense, and all these kids were like, "Oh, it's so deep." I mean, it just hits me. So I like, what does? Like, really? Like, explain to me what does? And then they wouldn't be able to explain it right, but then they'd be just like, "Oh, Ryan, you just don't get it. You're just not on that level yet."
Right.
It's like, okay, well, here we are 30 years later. I'm still not on that level, I guess, because I'll still listen to Nirvana and go, man, I love the way it sounds, but I have no idea what message he's trying to convey, if any. Right. I mean, he could just be writing gibberish, write a cool guitar riff and put some gibberish in there.
Basically, I mean, some music is just like jazz, right? Yeah. Like that's what I consider jazz. Like the counterpart to like weird lyrics that don't make any sense is like it's like jazz is like music that people just off the cuff,
Yeah.
And it's like when I'm like listening to jazz or like watching jazz, I'm like, that's great that you're good at playing music, but like it's almost like you're playing for yourself, not for anyone else. I don't know.
Right.
And it's like, it's almost like a practice session every time you go.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Jazz for me is one of those genres that's like, well, I can appreciate it, but it's not something I'm going to go down and buy an album. Right. If I'm studying or if I'm reading a book or something, to have some like soft like jazz playing in the background is kind of cool. It's like white noise kind of music, but I don't see myself going to a jazz club and sitting there for 3 hours, like I would like a rock concert or something. It's just not the same. But
Leah listens to chill hop. You ever heard of chill hop?
That's new to me.
It's like very low key electronic music.
Oh, okay. Like elevator music?
I would say it's not really like elevator music. Elevator music is like, I don't know, just boring.
It's its own genre.
Chill hop is a little bit more interesting, kind of jazzy, but like electronic and purposely like calming music.
Okay. So it's mostly instrumental then, I'm guessing? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it's all instrumental.
Okay.
And it's, it's good to like study to and things like that. It's just kind of a nice background noise.
Yeah. Because I can't read or study or anything if there's any music with words.
Oh yeah.
I can't do it. If I'm trying to read words on a page or write words on a page and I hear words coming from somewhere else, I get distracted so easily. But I can throw on anything instrumental. Like a lot of times I'll put on like a soundtrack or something, like a score, like I have like Braveheart and I have like Harry Potter, like I'll just throw on that score and it's like that's easy to study too, because it doesn't distract me with the words. But
we'll literally put on like yesterday she put on like Stardew Valley, just someone playing Stardew Valley and all the noises and the little songs and stuff, and just put that on the background.
Oh yeah, just to play.
Like, it's so funny. Like I don't know, she likes all sorts of stuff like that.
Right.
Just like little cutesy things like that.
Do you find that you guys are similar in your musical tastes or no?
Similar, yeah.
Okay.
I think so. By the way, Leah's my wife, if people don't know.
For the listeners.
Yes.
Leah's his wife.
Yes. She likes, and she'll probably be ashamed to admit it, but she likes, no, I can't even remember the name of the band. Fall Out Boy.
Oh, okay.
And I've never really liked Fall Out Boy.
There's worse bands you could like.
Yeah, I know.
I know it's kind of like that trendy band that like nobody wants to admit they like, but it's not bad. I mean, no, it's not. It's not my favorite, but it's definitely kind of, because to me punk rock is my favorite genre. So I mean I know Fall Out Boy's not technically that, but I mean it some of the songs do fall kind of under the poppy punk kind of sound, that kind of came later. So I mean, that's not too bad.
Yeah,
there's worse things you could be outed for, right? You know.
Yeah.
So let's talk more about the lyric thing, where you talk about you like bands that have lyrics that impact you.
Right. Yeah.
So what would be some examples of bands that do that the most for you?
So some of the bands, so the slower bands on here, especially, like Strahan and Towrs are both really like that for me.
Okay. I've never heard of either one of those bands.
Yeah,
never even heard the name. Are
small.
they like local?
Found them on Spotify. I don't know.
Oh, okay.
But they were just suggested, and I was like, oh, this is cool. And
isn't that cool? I mean, as a quick side thing, that I think that's what makes Spotify so cool. Is like all these bands that you would never hear.
Oh yeah.
That are similar styles to bands that you love are getting some play now because you're like, oh, I like this. I really like this band. Now Spotify is going to suggest this other band I've never heard of.
Right.
And this has happened to me sometimes, like over the weekend. It's like, oh, that's my favorite band.
Yeah,
like,
I know, it's crazy,
for
right?
the time, right? It's like I never would have heard of these guys, and now I want to buy everything they've ever put out.
I know, yeah.
So,
I've definitely done that. I've listened to a few songs of theirs and been like, oh, I need to buy everything they've ever done.
Yeah, right, exactly. So,
but I think like some examples. So Towrs has this song, "Belly of the Deepest Love," and it's basically, I think it's kind of from the perspective of like Mary passing on the story of Jesus to like children.
Okay. Like after the fact.
After the fact, yeah. And it has some really good, like, powerful lyrics of like let's see. Something of hammers. The beat of hammers. No, it's not beat of hammers. It's the. No, I can't think of it.
Yeah, I hate that.
Something. Sound of hammers are like drums of war or something like that.
Okay.
Or. One of the, like in the chorus of that song.
So does that be the hammers like the cross?
Yeah, like hammering his hands into the cross.
That's deep, man.
And like the chorus is like, oh, how you wish to be with me. That repeats over and over. And it's just like, that really spoke to me. It's like, I don't know. Like you don't really hear that in many Christian songs of like, of that, like really like close look at what like Jesus actually did, and like how much the reason is because he wants to be with us. Right. That's just like a really cool thought, right? It's like, why would the God of the universe want to be with me?
Right.
That just seems weird, right?
Yeah.
He wants to hang out with me.
It does, because we know ourselves.
Right.
And we think, I wouldn't even want to be with me. Why would the God of all the universe want to be with me?
So it's just a powerful thing, especially when you sing it along and you're like, trying to internalize it. So I think Towrs has a lot of songs that have like grown on me so much to where like I've listened to them so much and they've only gotten better. So like,
see, that means something, right? They have that lasting quality,
right? Because there's some songs they're catchy. It starts out high, you're like, oh, this is such a cool song, I love the lyrics, and then you start like listening to it more and you're like, all right, I think I get the gist.
Well, there's so for me, sometimes there's like a favorite band for a while. Like they might be like for 6 months. I'm like, I buy all their stuff, I listen to it nonstop, and then after that I never listen to them again, and I'm totally fine with that.
Yeah, exactly.
To where there's other bands that I first heard when I was 16 that to this day I can put on their album and still enjoy it just as much as I did, even though I've heard it a million times. So to me, that's like a lasting band. That's like, and of course that's individual, because that same band to someone else could be like, oh no, I never liked any of their stuff.
Yeah. So another example of lyrics, because I want to show off a little bit for people need to know about them. Yeah. They have a song called.
This is Towrs still.
Yeah. Okay. Towrs still. I think it's called. Well, I know the chorus is. I'm not sure if the name of the song is, but it's a handful of trash is like the base, and basically it goes all I have for you is a handful of trash and worn out shoes. But you always take me like that, or something like that.
Nice. Yeah.
And it's just like, it's such a good picture of like, you know, coming to God and like with all this stuff we think is valuable in our hands, and like, and him just being like, yes, your righteousness is trash.
Totally right. And that's
just like,
see, those are the Christian songs that hit me the most, are the ones that talk about our depravity, basically, and his love anyway. You know, I mean, not to talk about Five Iron again, but I don't know if you ever heard the song Dandelions by Five Iron. It's one of my favorite Five Iron songs, but that's the whole thing, is that dandelions are, dandelions are a weed, right? And they're a little flower, but they're weeds, you know, and the whole idea is the song starts out with talking about this little boy who brings to his mother this handful of dandelions, and to him it's the greatest treasure that he has. It's the best he has to offer, right? And his mom looks at it, she knows it's weeds, but she loves him anyway because he's giving her the best of what he's got, you know what I mean? And then that transitions into the next couple verses, start talking about us with God, and it says that you when God looks at us, it says you see flowers in these weeds. You know, somehow you see something that you love, you know, even though we're nothing but weeds. We're like, there's no good in us. There's nothing worthy of love, of him showing his love to us. So yeah, songs like that just kill me.
Yeah,
you know,
they really do.
So that's Towrs.
Yeah. And then Strahan is, or Strahan, I don't really know how you pronounce it, but
well, that's
who knows?
Yeah. Isn't there an actor with that last name? Stratham. I don't know. He's some action actor. Jason
Statham.
There you go.
Statham, yeah.
I don't think I've ever seen him in anything, but I'm not a big action movie guy, but
yeah, me either. But Strahan is, I think he would probably describe his band as like a modern Psalms almost.
Okay.
So, and I don't really know what makes it a psalm versus, you know.
Well, is it original lyrics?
Yeah.
Okay, so it
is original.
There's been a lot of bands that have taken the Psalms and turned them into songs with the same words. Right. But this is different. This is like original.
This is original lyrics, but you know, I guess in the style of Psalms, or like I guess the same. I don't know, approach as Psalms, I guess. Okay. But he also has some really good songs. I'm gonna have to look it up because I just, my memory is terrible, especially when I'm confronted by a microphone.
Well, the last one of these I did, we had a lot of that, and they were like, and they've already sent me texts saying, "Oh, you need to go in and say that this was, you know, that this was what I was trying to say," or, you know, whatever. It's kind of one of those things where it's like, oh man. But yeah, it's totally fun. I have a few of those too. I have to go in and say, oh, that you know, that band I was thinking it was this, or that song.
Yeah. Okay, let's see. Strahan. It's at the very bottom, isn't it? Oh yeah. Okay. So there's a song called "Help Me Believe." Mm-hmm. That's the verse that's like, "I believe, but help me believe." And it's like the centurion or whatever is talking to Jesus.
Yeah, I do believe. Help my unbelief.
Right.
Love it.
Yeah. that's what that song is. It's just like, you know, I think the chorus is like, "Lord, I believe, but help me believe," or something like that. And it's really good.
So I've always loved that verse in the Bible, but I've always also thought it was really strange. Because it like, if you do believe, why do you need help with your like, it's almost like a contradiction. Like, is he more saying I want to believe, but I also know that I'm struggling with it, kind of thing, and I need you to help me the rest of the way?
I almost think it's like, I don't know if it's the same word in Hebrew or Greek or whatever it's written in. If it's believe and believe, or if it's more like believe and like have faith.
Oh, that's
what
point.
I kind of.
That would be awesome.
See it as.
I'll have to look into that, because that would be really, really cool.
Yeah, it's just, I think that's kind of the flavor of it, though. Is like I believe, like I've made this step of like I trust what you're saying, but help me have more trust, or help me have
right. I still struggle
faith.
in my walk, kind of thing.
Help me to step out and like trust you more.
Yeah.
I guess.
Okay. Cool.
But
I don't mean to keep.
Yeah, there's a whole bunch of different ones that are really good.
Yeah, I love one of the cool things about doing this podcast is I learn new bands I've never heard of before, and I write them down, and I usually go, when I have time, I look them up and I try to listen to some of their stuff, and sometimes it's like, what was that guy talking about? And other times it's like, oh man, I want to get some more of this. This is great.
Well, these are slower, so they're like. Yeah. I like the folksy, a little bit folksy, slower, alternative, bands. I
like those too. There's a couple bands my brother-in-law turned me on to. One was First Aid Kit. Have you ever heard First Aid Kit? I think it's two sisters they're from another country. I forgot where, but it's kind of acoustic harmonies and stuff, and it's I really like it. But I'd never heard of them before that. And then there's the other one, Monsters and Men.
Oh yeah.
That's more known, but I had never heard of them. Oh yeah. But then when he showed me the one song, he goes, "Oh yeah, I've heard that song before."
Yeah. But they're good.
Yeah.
But a lot of their songs are really similar.
Oh yeah. Well, but, that's the thing, right? Like you get like a lot of people like that. I really like this song, so therefore I love the whole album because the whole album sounds like that one song. To where other people are like, can we get a little more,
variation?
Yeah, variation or something, Yeah. But. I wanted to ask too. You reminded me a minute ago when you were talking about the song you were saying about Mary telling the story of the cross, to children. Have you ever heard the band Children 18-3? Okay, they're pretty punky, but they're a Christian band. But there's three homeschooled siblings. And one of the things I love in music is two vocalists, right? Specifically when they sound way different from each other, like if there's a male and a female vocalist, and I mean lead vocalist, like where they both trade off singing, not like barely like not background vocals or whatever.
I get annoyed when they like tune people the background singer way into the background.
It's like
I can barely even hear
right exactly. But I've always really liked that where they have the two, then they go back, especially in the same song. Like even go as far back as like the Beatles, where John and Paul are singing lead parts in the same song. I love that, and then you get like into like Blink-182, the two singers. But with Children 18-3, it's the guy and the girl that both trade off, and some songs he'll sing all the leads, some songs she'll sing all the leads, some songs they go together, which is awesome. But there's a song on their first album called "Homemade Valentine." And I usually post it on Facebook around Easter, and I say, this is my all-time favorite Easter song. And the only response I ever get, if any, because I think people are like, what is he even talking about? But sometimes I'll get a response like, dude, that's a cool song, but how is that an Easter song? Which is always kind of disappointing to me, because I'm like, if you just listen to the lyric, but it's not like flat out, this song's about Easter. But the whole thing is about the disciples right after Jesus is crucified. And it's right before he rises again. So it's dealing with the doubt of the disciples, where they're like, we've spent 3 years with you. We've given everything to you. Now you're dead, right? You claimed you would come again, but what's the deal? Kind of a thing. Like, when is this happening? You're supposed to rise from the, like this whole thing. And I just love it, because it's just such an awesome song. And and that's the whole thing. It says, we pasted all our hopes on him, like the paper hearts on a homemade Valentine, but we wasted all our hopes on a whim. He let us down. And it sounds kind of like bad, but it's just so honest, right? Like, can you imagine what some of these disciples are feeling like? Like, man, we thought this was the Messiah, because there was some doubt there. I'm sure that they still believed that he was gonna rise again or whatever, but there's got to be still some doubt there, Right. I liked how it dealt with that. So anyway,
I really like songs that tell a story of like, you have like two opposite sides of the story in the same song, where you have like the doubt, and then you have like the realization,
right?
And it like, cycles through in the song, and then kind of takes, especially I love it when they take the same chorus in the beginning that means one thing, and then turn it around to mean something like different in the end. That's,
right.
You know,
Kind of twist on you.
Yeah. It's just a really cool way to do things. But yeah, Towrs is actually like that too. They have a guy and a girl singer.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Oh, now I definitely got to check them out.
So there's some of the songs have them both singing, but yeah, they're just really good.
That's awesome. So that's really cool. I look forward to checking them out then.
Yeah.
Cool. So how about most recently? This is a question I always ask because it's exciting. What most recently was the newest? Like we kind of just talked about how when you find a new band or you find a band or a singer or something that you just really get into and you're like, oh my gosh, like this, I got to get everything they own. And then you listen to nothing but that for like months and months and months. Like what's the most recent that's happened for you and who was it?
So unfortunately I don't commute anymore. So I don't have that time to like listen to bands for a long time.
That's most of where you're listening, isn't it?
Yeah. And I haven't listened to music too often. Like it's usually like in the car with the kids and Leah. And then it's like
and then you gotta listen to
music.
Then you gotta listen to Chill Hop all the time. and Fall Out Boy.
Try not to be stressed out. No, mostly in the car it's like 80s music or 50s or
wow, that's a big gap there. 80s and 50s, huh?
Yeah, I mean,
okay.
Leah likes all sorts of music, so she just kind of puts something on that everyone will like. So
nice.
We don't really ever get to, you know, if I was in control of the radio, I would just be playing like, you know, Towrs or Strahan.
Right.
I never wanted them to be like introspective, but like no one really wants to do that in the car.
Like, Dad, this sucks. What are you doing?
Yeah.
Why are you making
I'm like, this is a great song. Listen to the lyrics. Come on, guys.
Yeah.
But
sure,
no,
you're just
they
little
don't.
kids, but you'll get it.
Yeah, just internalize all the lyrics, please.
Yeah.
But no, it doesn't happen that way.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Maybe someday, maybe when they're older, you
Yeah.
can really start breaking that down for them.
Right.
You know.
Yeah, so I think Strahan is probably the most recent
Okay.
addition to the list.
And would you put them at this point like in your top 5 favorite bands of all time, or
Yeah.
Okay, you would. Okay.
Yeah.
And how long ago did you first hear of them?
Probably like a year and a half or 2 years ago.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's pretty recent then.
Yeah.
Okay. And they already made the top 5. That's impressive.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I've grown a lot in my taste of music.
Yeah.
In high school,
Right? Yeah.
I had such a weird variety of music I liked.
Yeah.
Because it was, let's see, started out, my parents like jazz. And so I would, I'd be like, this is all right, and listen to it with them. But then I found electronic music and started listening to some of that. Not like dubstep because that came later, but more of like just almost like jazz, but with electronic.
Okay. They call it acid jazz, or is that what they?
I don't know. I'm not
there's
sure.
some term for it or something.
Electronica, I'm pretty sure is all it's called. But there were some cool bands that I found with that.
Okay.
And then later got into Pillar.
Oh yeah,
Pillar.
Yeah.
I still like
Rap
listen
rock,
to them,
man.
and I'm like, ooh, this is painful.
Yeah.
To
Dude, there's a
listen
song.
to.
There's a song on the Fireproof album, Echelon. I can still rock that song, man. Every day, whenever. I mean, that's and I like them better in their kind of like wannabe Limp Bizkit kind of rap rock kind of phase.
Right. Yeah.
By the time Fireproof was gone, and it was the next one. Where do we go from here?
Oh, yeah.
Had less of that. I mean, it was still good. It was still a great rock album, but they kind of shied away from the kind of the rap rock that I liked more on Above and on Fireproof. I actually, I don't know if you've ever, I found somewhere like in a thrift store or something, I found their very first album, Metamorphosis, that came out even before Above, dude. And I was like, oh, dude, of course, no one else in the world has any idea why I'm so excited about this.
I know, right?
I'm like, no, you don't understand. This is like out of print. You can't even get this. And I just got it for $1 at the thrift store. This is great. And then you pop it on and you're like, yeah, definitely their first demo album.
Yeah,
it's like, you're like, they hadn't quite honed in their styles there. But anyway, so I was a fan of Pillar. We saw Pillar play live in Ventura Theater one time. When we first became Christians. It was one of our first Christian concerts. Then Project 86 opened up for them.
Right.
I forgot who the opener was, but anyway, so that was your kind of your rock intro.
And I think it just like it reinforced my view of Christianity as like It's like, oh, I have this superpower and no one else has. Like, you know?
Yeah. You're fireproof.
I'm fireproof. God will protect me even if I walk into a burning building.
Right. Mm-hmm.
You know, and it's like, I mean, certain parts of that are true, but also like, no.
Yeah, right.
I just had a very...
Yeah, only if he tells you to walk into a burning building. Then I would trust it. I would just be like, all right, God, I'm going to go and hope you're going to protect me. And God's going, I don't want you to go in there. What are you
there's a reason I made it on fire.
Right.
So that people
the heat
wouldn't go in
the
there.
door. That means danger.
I invented fire.
Yeah, exactly. So.
It burns things.
Oh, funny, man. So when would you say that? Was that like high school when you started listening to like Pillar? Or?
Yeah.
Okay.
And
because how old are you again? You're younger than me.
32.
Oh, you're quite a bit younger than me. Okay, so I got 12 years on you, man.
Uh-huh.
Okay, so you were in high school, like what, 2000?
I graduated 2008.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. Nice. So that's okay. So I cut you off again. So you left off a Pillar. So where do we go from there?
So after Pillar, it was Switchfoot.
Okay.
And let's see, what else did I like back then?
More like the Christian rock. Did you ever feel like, because you were a Christian and we'll get more into this in the spiritual discussion later, but did you ever feel like, was there a time where you're like, I can only listen to Christian music? Or were your parents telling you that, or did you come up with that on your own, or have you always listened to everything and not really?
I've always liked other music, but always gravitated towards Christian music.
Okay.
Just because it's, I agree with the sentiment behind it.
Right.
But like, for instance, like Vampire Weekend is not a Christian band, of course. It's actually like kind of the opposite, because
are all the other ones on there Christian bands? Is Towrs and Strahan also? Oh, okay.
Yeah, they're all Christian bands.
Interesting. Okay.
So, and I think like I make the comparison, like if you listen to the radio on Christian music,
right, it's
very like, I would say that the songs don't have any story. It's just one like we're already way up here. We're just gonna stay up here for the whole song, right? And it's just like yes, everything about Christianity is great. You never have to, and it's like they don't tell the full story of So
it's almost phony in a sense, right? I have a hard time with a lot of the new contemporary Christian music for that reason, because I feel like it only tells, like you said, half a story.
Right.
Is it true that Jesus is great and that he loves us? And all that's true. But that doesn't mean that if you're a Christian, that's your day every day.
Right.
Every day is great now that I'm a Christian. There's never any problems and I just walk on clouds all the time and there's no struggles. It's like, and I think that paints the wrong picture. So
yeah, that's exactly my problem with that.
Right.
Is it just feels like, it feels like the music is telling you to ignore your problems and it almost like just kind of push those down and like focus on God. Push those down, focus on God.
Right.
And it's not, and I think in actuality, the Bible brings you through those things with God instead of like pushing down all the other like negative stuff and then turning towards God.
Right.
It's more like inviting God into all that and like into the mess, you know? So
something that I've been kind of saying for quite a few years now, something that I've noticed is that it's like there's two different gospels being preached. There's the one that says, believe in Jesus and he'll make your life great. Right. He'll make your life on earth better. You'll have a great job and you'll have a great wife and your kids will never talk back to you. And you'll have just this perfect life and everything will be just perfect. Right. And then there's the other one that says, no, receive Jesus. And in a lot of ways, your physical life might get harder, right? You're going to go through struggles. You're going to go, but the difference is you have hope now. Right. And you have somebody with you taking you through that. Right. And at the end of the tunnel, you have something far greater than any struggles you could ever have or any greatness you could ever have on earth, Right. And sadly, that the first gospel I said seems to be preached a lot, and people hear, they think, oh yeah, I want this Jesus. But then they get in there and then they're disappointed. Right. Or they think they did something wrong. And they're like, no, wait a minute. I did the thing. I believe in Jesus. Why did I lose my job? Why did my wife leave me? Why does my kid sick? Why, like all these things.
And then they start getting convinced, if they're going the wrong direction, they start getting convinced, well, I'm not doing enough for God to reward me with those things. And then you just get into this works-based gospel.
And that's what they're taught. You just need to do better.
Right.
God's mad at you because you did something wrong.
What are you being punished for?
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah. What's your hidden sin you're not telling everybody? You know? So, yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
That's a bummer.
I think the real gospel is the gospel that makes no sense. It doesn't make any sense to people,
to a human mindset. Yeah.
In the world. It's not a give this thing up and then you get, like, it's not like a transaction of like, do this thing for me and I will give you this thing for you. Right. It's just, nope, I'm could pay for everything, know?
Right.
Like, right. And it doesn't make sense to a lot of people. So,
well, because it flies right in the face of everything else the world teaches, right? That's why. And that's why, what's the verse that says it will be foolishness to those in the world, right?
Right.
Like they don't understand it.
Right. It almost seems like a scam, right? It's like, what's the catch?
Right.
Right. Like you come into a church and they're like, no, everything's free. Right. You don't need to do anything. You're forgiven. You're a Christian. If you just say yes, you're good.
Yes. Yeah.
You're like, okay.
Yeah, what's the catch?
But what are you going to get me later with something? Like, what is it?
Right, is the bill going to come in the mail? What's the deal, right?
Yeah.
But I think so. I have a friend who was struggling with certain things, and he says, and the thing he always struggled with, he says, I just don't understand how God can love me. And I said, because he's by his own words, he's like, I'm a horrible person. I do bad things. I keep going back to the same sin over and over and over. He goes, I don't understand how God can love me. And I said, dude, that's because you're not God. And I said, I understand, because we try to put it on a human level and say, well, if this guy kept sinning against me over and over again, I wouldn't love him. Right. Like, if we're being honest, you're like, I'd be mad at you. I would want you, something bad to happen to you. Right. And so God doesn't view things like we do.
Right.
So whenever we try to somehow understand God, right, which is a problem with people with unbelief too. They say, well, I can't believe in God because this is the way you say this God is, and I don't like that. And I'm like, well, it doesn't matter if you like it or not. He either is that, or he's either God or he's not.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, but a lot of people are like, well, I don't like that God because he doesn't line up with my own, ideologies. It's like, okay.
And I think, one of the things I really like about listening to non-Christian bands is trying to figure out from their perspective, what do they think about how God operates?
Yes.
And I really like, even when songs are completely rejecting the gospel, right? But they're trying to find some way of explaining like why they rejected it. Right. I think it's just a really good insight into the way people are thinking about it. Right. And how, as Christians, we need to be addressing those misconceptions when we're sharing.
Totally.
So like, Vampire Weekend, I think it has a song that's about, basically like, Christians condemn half the world. Like half the world it's something like half the world is sending me to hell or something like that. And just like kind of this accepting that and just saying like, just come with me, it's all right. Like, we'll go to hell together. All
my friends will be there. It'll be a big party, right? That's what a lot of people always try to say. But
we'll talk about hell later because I have a lot of interesting things about that.
Good.
But I think it's like, it's just really interesting to see that perspective, because then I can adjust the way I talk to people who think that and say like, no, it's not, it's not, half the world's not condemning you. It's yourself condemning you, right? You have this thing in front of you. You have your life in front of you, and you can either make the choice to follow yourself and like what you want to do and just kind of push into the back of your mind the feeling of like not having a purpose, right, or not having like something to hold on to, not having someone to love you truly. You could push those things off, or you can turn and say, no, I really do want to find out what is my purpose. Like, I do want to be loved. I want to find out, and God can bring you to him through that. And so I think it's, people's misconceptions is like Christians just say, oh, here's all these rules. If you don't follow these rules, like, sorry, but you're going to hell.
Right.
No bad feelings or anything, but like, yeah, you're going to burn in eternity. You know what I mean? Like, it's just it's a bizarre thing to think about when you're an unbeliever.
No,
because it's
totally. Yeah.
It's like,
totally.
so you're just you're kindly telling me that I'm going to go to hell.
Right.
And that I have to do all of your nonsense, going to church wearing dress up clothes. It doesn't make any sense. That version of Christianity doesn't make sense.
Right.
And so, I think I really like, one of the things I really like doing is kind of rephrasing things in a way that gets people to think about it differently.
Yes.
Which I feel like I do too often, especially, with the youth group. I'm always like, oh, have you thought about it like this? And like, it's
that's great though.
Sometimes I go too far.
No, but I mean, like for me as a dad whose kids have been with you in youth group, I appreciate that, because that's what I want youth leaders to be doing. I want them to be challenging my kids to think more deeply, to even question. I want them to question things,
Right.
I don't want them just to believe what I believe because I say so.
Right.
I want them to examine it and even attack it. And just like we've all had to do at some point in our lives, we've had to come to that point where like, okay, is this really true?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I know I believe this. I want this to be true, but is it really? Right. Like, and you got to get down in there in the trenches sometimes. And it's kind of scary sometimes when you're in there. But for me, I came out of that stronger in my faith than when I went in there.
And I think there was I won't name names, but there was a woman that came to our church that asked me to talk to her son about, because her son, after graduating from high school, had really kind of started doubting and not going to church, and like wasn't really sure about Christianity. Yeah. And she was almost like asking me, come over and convince him to be a Christian again.
Oh yeah.
Right.
As if you have that power. Right.
So I go over there, sit down, and it was kind of funny because she almost like ambushed her son with it, and I didn't realize. I thought it was going to be like a mutual, oh yeah, you're like, my son's curious and he wants to meet with you, But no, it was like, here, I brought this over. Yeah. We're just going to talk, I was like, oh great. But one of the things I told him, because his mom was like, he's having doubts and like, how do you deal with this and stuff? And I told him like, well, everybody goes through a period of doubting and really examining the faith. And I think one of the most powerful verses is when Jesus says, "Seek and you will find." And I think that's really powerful for someone who's seeking and feels like they're lost. And I told him like, it's okay. Like, it's okay that you're in this period of time where you're like, I don't even know if God's real. Right. Like, I've done that. And I think everyone needs to go through that in order to find out for themselves, is God real? Right. And I just told them, like, as long as you keep seeking him, just don't ignore him, don't pretend like he doesn't exist for yourself. But if you're truly seeking, then that's a healthy place to be. Yeah. So I think his mom was a little bit surprised that I told him that he's okay with where he's at. Right.
She's like, I'm not inviting this guy over again.
Yeah, it's like, well, you were supposed to like lay down the law. Yeah. Yeah. And I did like answer some of his questions. It's like, why would a loving God, create the devil? Number one. And you're like, I don't know. Right. That's a hard question.
See, for me, the why questions are always like, I don't think we can ever answer those. Like if someone says, why did God do X, Y, Z? I don't know why.
God, I don't know.
I can tell you he did it because I trust the scriptures and they say he did it. Right. You say, well, why? I don't know. I trust that God has his reasons. Right. That doesn't mean I have to understand everything he does or why he does things. But
I think we can get caught in the trap of like, I just can't understand it. Like, I just like, I'll just ignore it.
Right.
You know, like I think certain Christians, they grow up in the church and they almost overlook passages that are hard to swallow like that, where it's like, oh yeah, God rained down fire on Sodom and Gomorrah.
Right.
And that's how it is.
Right.
And you never really look into it. But then it's later down the line, you know, a non-Christian comes up to you and says, hey, like, why do you believe in God? They burn people. He burned people alive in these cities.
Right.
And you're like, yeah, I don't know, like, why God would do that. And it makes you question.
Right.
Right. Like, I think it's important to ask, why would God do this? But then there's only a certain distance we can go before we have to say, I don't know.
Right.
You know, for instance, Sodom and Gomorrah, it's like, people argue, well, it's like, oh, it's just like a fun-loving gay town, and God was just like, boom, I hate gay people, you're dead, you know, and like, that's not what happened. I mean, you look at it and it's like, I mean, can you imagine like going into a city, being a visitor to a city, at your friend's house, and then you're just surrounded by people who are like, hey, send your brother out so we can rape him. Like, I mean, that's the picture of the whole town, right? It's like, that's what God was angry at, not like, you know, pride parades or whatever.
Yeah, right. It has nothing to do with hating homosexuals.
No,
it's not about that at all, right? I mean,
it was just, they were so far gone.
Right.
And like, it was just merciful to get rid of them. Right. Because it would affect so much else if he let them be. Right. You know, so I don't think we really need to understand like the full extent to what his reasons were, but as long as we have to mix that with viewing his character in other places. Yeah. Right. And like trusting that his character is still true through all of that. Right. And that he did have good reasons.
Yeah. Even if we don't understand those reasons, right? Yeah. That's one of the things that I find fun about doing this. One of the many things. Grab her because she's her nails are making way too much noise on the. There you go. Come here, you. One of the cool things about doing this podcast is asking those questions of the people that say, "No, I don't believe in God."
Oh yeah, that's very interesting.
So I mean, you're actually the first Christian I've
really
had, so it's always interesting, and I love listening to the reasons behind why they don't, you know, they don't believe in God or whatever the case may be. And that's something that always comes up is, you know, well, a loving God, right? How could a loving God allow this to happen? Or you know, those kind of common things. But it's always fascinating to me how even the people that don't believe, not all of them, but many of them care enough to not believe. If that makes any sense. Like it's not like unicorns. Like I'm like, yeah, I don't believe unicorns exist, but I'm not going to spend my entire life trying to disprove that they exist either. Yeah. But then
because
there's people,
like, it's ridiculous.
Yeah, there's people like Richard Dawkins and Christopher Hitchens and these people that spend their entire lives and writing books trying to trying to refute what they don't even think believes. Like who cares, right?
And the concerning part is that it's targeted specifically at Christians.
Yes.
I don't think they really have a problem with Buddhists,
any other
Muslims, any other religion.
Right.
It's almost like they see this religion is the one that's the scariest to me because it's true. Right.
See, that's what I'm saying. It's almost like they know something in there. And there was I forgot who was debating Christopher Hitchens one time, but he said something so profound. It might have been Frank Turek. I can't remember who it was, but he was debating Christopher Hitchens, and he was listening to Christopher Hitchens talk about his hatred of this Christian God, right? And he finally says, he goes, you know what, Chris? He goes, the way I see it, here's your life philosophy. Here's what you believe, Chris. He says, he goes, you believe there is no God and I hate him.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
And I thought, oh my gosh, that's like one of the most profound things I've ever heard in my life. Because it's true. Like there is no God and I hate him. Right. Well, how can you hate him if he's not real, if he doesn't exist? Yeah. You know, and maybe from his perspective, from Christopher Hitchens' perspective, he's like, I hate this God that you people have made up. I hate this religion of Christianity and your Bible and your Jesus and all this stuff. I hate all that, even though I don't think it's real. I hate what it is in my country. I hate what all you guys stand for and what you, you know, and then they go through the big old tirade about how, and you Christians hate this group and this group and this group, and you hate all these people. And I'm like, whoa, I don't hate anybody. What are you talking about? That's not me, you know?
That's what I find is non-Christians pick out examples of Christians who get it wrong. And it's a straw man. Right. It's just like, that person is ridiculous.
Yes.
So
and we'd agree.
You are all ridiculous.
And we probably agree that person they've made is ridiculous.
Oh, yeah.
I look at that guy and go, that's not even a Christian.
Like
I know what
Westboro Baptist Church, they're like, that's what all Christians are like. They're at someone's funeral, saying you're going to hell. Like, I would never do that. No Christian, actual Christian would ever do that. Correct. That's horrible.
Correct.
That's not gently loving someone. Like, how could you possibly look at that and say, this aligns with the Bible? Yeah, that's what the Bible teaches. No, of course it doesn't. So it's like,
you ever want to see a really interesting clip? If you've never seen it, look up, you know, Russell Brand, the actor, comedian guy. He had a talk show for a while. I don't think he does it anymore, but he had some of the people from Westboro Baptist Church on the show. And it's really, I mean, it's eye-opening, first of all, to kind of hear where these people are coming from. It's frightening. But the way Russell Brand and his sense of humor, just I can imagine. Dude, it's great, man. There's just so many times where you're laughing. Like, the Westboro guys are trying to be so serious.
Oh, yeah.
And Russell Brand is like, really? Like, really? Like, it's really funny. You should look it up. But that's exactly the point. I made that point a while back with someone else I was talking to about exactly what you just said. Right. For a lot of people, they look at that group of 12 people in the middle of nowhere, and they say, yep, there's Christians for you.
Yeah.
And the rest of us are like, wait, what?
Oh, yeah.
I hate those people just as much as you do. Like, what are you talking about?
And I don't think it's a mistake that only atheists make. You know, it's Christians that do that with other religions and with atheists, too. We pick the most ridiculous atheists we can think of.
Yeah.
And we say, you're all like that. Right. When, for instance, I don't know, we pretend like if we debate Carl Sagan and win, that like we'll win over all atheists in the world or something, like, and it's like, we need to treat people on a case-by-case basis. Like, people might be atheists for completely different reasons. I guarantee most of the atheists in the world are not going around saying, I have an argument against Christianity that's just solid and like scientifically proven, and honestly, all I need is just for someone to come along and say, like, look at this other scientific proof, and then I'll be convinced. Like, there's just a very small minority of people that think that way. Yeah. And I think most of the reason why people are atheists is because of life experience. And I've heard it a million times. Someone will say, you know, I'm an atheist. And then you'll dig deeper and they'll say, well, yeah, my parents were Christian, and they, like, I just hated everything about they were one way at church, and then at home they were terrible, and I didn't like that.
Or I just hated church and they forced me to go. Like, it doesn't always have to be like the parents were not living out what they were like practicing what they were preaching. But I mean, so maybe let me ask you if you have the same kind of struggle I have, because I didn't become a Christian until I was like 23, 24. So I was very late to the game. You too?
So I grew up in the church. I started going when I was about 10. Okay. And then
your parents were believers when you were growing up?
Yeah.
Okay.
Interesting though, because my dad went to church, my mom didn't. My dad was still leans conservative. My mom leans liberal. Okay. So a very interesting dynamic at home. Yeah. They I still think they were great parents, and they loved us a lot. But yeah, so growing up in the church through high school, I was definitely just on board. And pretty much on board until I was 23, through all of college. And but it was always just like almost like a club I was a part of, Whereas like, yeah, I know I believe these things intellectually, but like it's really hard for me to feel it.
Right.
You know,
because it probably wasn't your own personal relationship with the Lord. It was, you know, and that's what I was going to ask you if you have this struggle, because for me, I didn't grow up in the church, but like for you, especially, you can see firsthand what that's like to grow up in the church and then not necessarily feel like you have that personal relationship. And so you can see the danger in that. But at the same time, you have kids now. So you're like, okay, so do I raise my kids in the church or do I not? You know, and of course, like in my situation, I did anyway, even though, I mean, because I'm not going to not teach them what I know to be true. Yeah, I'm not going to not take them to church.
That's your job as a parent, right?
Correct.
To tell your kids the truth.
Yes,
I mean, that's
exactly. So, but all the while, I always try to explain to them the problems with that, right? Like I explain to them, I don't want them to have my faith. They can't have my faith. They have to have their own walk with the Lord, and they have to develop that for themselves. So that's kind of the route that I've taken. Obviously you have too, because I know you do bring your kids to church and you know, so. And
I think, definitely growing up in the church, I tended to focus in on people's flaws and think like, I don't know if I really want to be a part of this kind of environment, you know, like, but luckily early on, I did have this sense of, just because they're like that as Christians doesn't mean I have to be like that.
Right.
You know, Christianity is not something where everyone just conforms to be the same kind of Christian and like dress the same way, talk the same way, have the same flaws, you know. Right. It's like, and I think early on I recognized that, luckily, that I could have my own faith. But on the other hand, having my own faith and not talking about it to anyone made me feel very alone in it, you know, and not feel like confident in it. So yeah, all the way up through high school, college, had the same kind of faith, had this struggling of, you know, am I really a Christian? Right. You know, yes, I believe all these things, but am I really a Christian? Am I really invested in this? It doesn't feel like I've given my whole life to this thing, you know. But when I was 23, after going through a few breakups, not even like breakups, I mean like
girlfriends you've had, you mean?
Not even girlfriends. I mean, it was so I first started dating when I was 23. Okay. Right? I hadn't dated anyone before that. Wow. And so
that's a blessing.
Yeah, I know. I would suggest that to everyone. Wait until you're in college. I wish I would have went that route. Yeah, because it was just much better. Yeah. Even then, my hormones were not like helping me any. Right. But you know, I had a few dates with a few girls, and like, you know, it felt heartbreaking to get rejected after like 5 dates. You know, because it was like, I had this picture in my mind that was like, oh, like we're gonna end up together or whatever. And, you know how it is when you first fall in love and all that. Oh yeah, she's the one. Everyone is the one. Yeah, of course. But I was really heartbroken by that multiple times, which is silly for someone that's been through like year-long relationships. I'm like, 5 dates, okay. But yeah, I was fragile. I was a fragile man. And I just broke. Like I just broke, and I was, and I was like, you know what? Like I can't do this. Like I just don't feel like doing this anymore. I just graduated from college, or not almost graduated, but I'd almost graduated from college, and I still didn't have any jobs lined up. You know, everyone else had done things over the summers to like do internship programs and all this stuff, and I was like, well, I know I want to do something important. I know I want to do, I want to have a job that's fulfilling, but I don't have that, and I don't have anybody to share with. I don't have a wife. I don't have a girlfriend. I have nothing. Right. And it felt like, you know what? Like maybe the way I'm going just isn't like it's not worth worrying about, right? Like I've had this specific picture of where to go in my mind of like, I want to end up here and then here and here and here.
Right.
And like, that's such a narrow view of what I could do.
Right.
And I think the final straw was when I finally just prayed, like, God, I give up.
Yeah.
You know?
Yep.
And I think people are almost alarmed to know that the prayer to God to be a Christian is I give up. Right? Because it's like, people are like, oh no, like I've got this. Like that's the whole view is like, I've got this. I can be a Christian now. You know, God empower me to do all the things.
Right.
But like in actuality, I mean, in Jesus's ministry, like all he really ever wanted from people was just submit to me.
Right.
And like giving up sounds really bad.
Right.
But for me, it was a very freeing experience of just like, I give it all to you. I don't, you know, you can deal with my romantic life. You can deal with my, all that stuff. Right. You'll do something with it. Great.
Right.
And from then on, I was like, this is so much easier now.
Yeah. You know how many stories are just like that?
Oh yeah.
Like, I mean, not just like it, like the same circumstances, but that give up aspect.
Oh yeah.
Like even some of what we know as the greatest preachers of all time, like you listen to their salvation story or they talk about kind of similar to you, like, oh, I grew up in the church and then I went right into ministry out of high school. I was a missionary in Africa for 5 years and all this stuff was happening all around me. The Lord was doing all these amazing things. And like, you're thinking, oh, this is awesome. And then he gets to the end, and you know where I was at the end of all that? Totally empty.
Oh yeah.
And he goes, and they'll say like, I just prayed one day to the Lord and just said like, Lord, I give up. I don't know what you want. Like what I'm done. It's over. And the Lord says, all right, now I can use you.
Oh, I know. It's
you know
crazy.
what I mean? Like, it's almost like the Lord saying, that's what I was waiting for you to do, to get to the end of your own rope. Stop trying to do it all on your own. Stop trying to grab it yourself and just say, here you go.
Yeah.
You know, it's like a old friend of mine always used the example of a motorboat and a sailboat. He says, don't be a motorboat Christian, be a sailboat Christian.
Right.
Because you know, the sailboat, all you do is put the sail up and the wind takes you where it's going to take you, right? And that's the way we should be as Christians. But a lot of times we're in the motorboat and we're trying to go, you know, the Lord's trying to push us over here.
Against the wind.
Yeah, we're going the wrong direction. All right, let me just put a little more gas in this thing and, you know, try to get out of here. It's like, don't do that, you know? But that's a lot of us. And I think we've all been there at one point or another, you know, in our walks with the Lord. But
I try to ever since then I've tried to almost learn those lessons in advance. like trying to like, okay, God, you don't need to bring me to that point again. Right. Yeah. Like I'm good. I'll just really study, you know, like I'll really listen to these songs and make sure I know. You know, like I get it from other people's experience before I have to experience it myself.
Right, because you don't want to go through the hardness. Right. You just want to know the lesson.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's like, but you can't learn it unless you go through the hardness. It's like, but I don't want to. Just tell me it. Just tell me it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's so awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we went right into spiritual stuff, and we'll get back into that.
How did that even come from songs? I don't even remember.
Yeah, I don't know, but we're good on there. You want to jump into some politics, and then we'll finish off with the end of the spiritual stuff.
Yeah.
Because usually a lot of times talking about politics obviously bleeds into our spiritual beliefs as well, because they're so connected. So the first thing I always ask is, would you even consider yourself a political person?
No,
not at all.
I would say I don't. I'm not a Republican. I'm not a Democrat. I agree with certain points on both sides. I disagree with certain points on both sides.
Me too.
Again, I think it's a case by case basis. If you're going to vote for someone, you should really look at what have they done before? What's their attitude? You know, how are they as a person? What kind of decisions are they going to make that are going to affect the people? You know.
So do you think that we should vote then based like on Like I'll take my own personal moral values and my own family values and that kind of thing, and then I'll try to pick a candidate who tends to lean more towards those values. Would you say that's a wise way to vote?
I don't know, because I think people that don't necessarily hold our same values still have very valid opinions about other things, and sometimes. If we only say, here's my values, and like if like I need to compare them against these values, and the better one of them lines up, like we're good to go.
Right.
That doesn't take into account, maybe that person says they have all these values, but like doesn't actually do them. Right. Which
there's a lot of things that are platforms, right? Like they'll say, "Oh, you elect me, and I'm gonna do this." And it's like, how often do they actually do anything about that?
There's so many politicians that are like, "I'm a Christian," and you're like,
"Yeah,
okay."
Right.
What you say shows you're not. Like, the Democrat over there is more of a Christian than you are.
Yeah.
Right.
Because that has just become like a label, right? Like even our current president who says he's a Catholic, but it's like most of the people in the Catholic community are like, no, you're not. Yeah. It's like you believe in this. All these are like very strongly against the Catholic Church. Like how can you? But that's the whole thing, right? And I was talking to somebody one time about the claim to be a Christian. Can you be a Christian and not follow any of Christianity's like guidelines? And I said, let me explain it to you this way. I said, I was a vegetarian when I was 16. I became a vegetarian. And then whenever Addie was born, Bethany was pregnant with Addie around that time. So it was like 15, 16 years later, I started eating meat again. And I told this person, I said, well, okay, so let me say, so after I start eating meat again, can I still claim to be a vegetarian?
Right.
And if I said, I know I can make that claim, but is my claim true? I cannot be a meat-eating vegetarian. That just doesn't make any sense because the definition of a vegetarian is someone who doesn't eat meat.
Right.
So you can't have it both. And I see it the same kind of way. You can't be a Christian who denies like the 5 main teachings of Jesus. I mean, you just can't do it, you know? I mean, it doesn't mean that Christians aren't going to disagree about certain little things here and there, you know, but like, for example, like I don't think you can be a Christian and claim that Jesus is not the only way of salvation. Or that,
of course.
You know what I'm saying? Like things like that are heavy teachings and doctrines, you know?
Right.
So anyway, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's, you know, I think it's 1 Peter that says, like, you'll know them by their fruit, right? And of course, we don't want to say, I know that person's not a Christian because of X, Y, and Z, because they did this thing, they did this thing.
Right.
Everyone does things.
Yes.
It's whether you can see that person is trying to head in the right direction. But even if we do, even if we see someone heading in the right direction or not heading in the right direction, still doesn't give us the right to say that person is a Christian, that person is not a Christian.
Right.
We can say, you know, they're not walking the right path right now. They may claim to be a Christian, but they're not going the right way right now.
Right. Do you think there's ever a point where, out of concern for somebody, you might say, I agree with you, you can never say you're not a Christian.
Yeah.
But do you think there's ever a time where you might say, hey, I don't know, man, I was reading through the book of 1 John today, and it says certain things about if you are truly believe these things won't be happening. So maybe you should examine your own,
for sure.
You know, like Paul would say, examine yourselves whether or not the Spirit be in you or not.
Yeah.
Not so much in a judgy way, but just saying, hey, I'm not saying I think you're not saved. I'm just saying you might want to pray about it.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Okay.
Yeah, I think in order for you to do that for someone, they have to have an attitude of, I am a Christian. Because you can't tell someone that if they're not a Christian.
Yeah, because it doesn't mean anything.
It doesn't mean anything, right? It's if someone is saying, yes, I'm a Christian, I'm devoted to what the Bible says. Okay, well then you should listen to the Bible. Right? Here's the Bible. Here's what it says. Yeah, like at that point you're not to blame when you're going to go to them and say, here's this thing in the Bible that I think you should listen to.
Well, and we're kind of at a weird place right now in the world because I meet very few Christians who will say they believe the entire Bible. Right. So it's almost like, and then they kind of cherry pick, you know, the things they like, and then they leave. And I'm kind of like, well, how do you know the things you're cherry picking are the right, true things? I mean, because if you're already making the claim that only some of the Bible's true, and you as a human are deciding which parts you think are true and which are false, how do you know you're making the right decision?
Oh,
right?
It's bizarre.
You see what I'm saying? Like,
it's also bizarre to think, okay, so you're rejecting parts of this.
Mm-hmm.
Why would a God who is true
Mm-hmm.
have people write a Bible that has some untruths in it?
Right. Right.
It's all or nothing. You cannot say, I only believe some of the parts of the Bible, because then you're saying God made mistakes on these parts.
Right. Exactly.
And then your view of God is he's not God.
Right.
Right.
Or they'll come in and they'll say that it's not that God made a mistake, it's that the people who wrote the Bible made the mistakes.
Right.
See, they'll say that God told them one message, but they wrote it different because they're fallible human beings and they wanted to put their own little spin on it.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
so it's like, then there's that whole argument.
That's a whole nother thing.
But back to politics. So we're talking about politicians who claim to be certain things like Christians or Catholics or whatever the case may be. Do you think that because it's America, and America has always been known as a quote unquote Christian nation, mm-hmm. right? Because of our founding fathers and that kind of thing. Do you think that almost like presidents feel like they have to say something? Because if a candidate got up there and said, "Oh, I worship Satan. I'm a devil worshiper."
Yeah,
I mean, right?
That wouldn't go over too well.
Right, yeah, like even
with non-Christians, they'd be like,
"Yes, yeah." I don't know. I mean, I don't believe in God, but I don't know about that.
Okay, yeah.
You know, so I mean, they have, and it's sad because they have to be really careful. And I almost wish they wouldn't. I wish they would almost just lay it all out for us and just let us pick who we think would best run the country. You know?
I would like someone who is unapologetically atheist.
Yes.
As a president.
Yes.
If they're honest.
Correct.
Versus someone who's faking Christianity.
Right.
I don't want someone making people believe that's what a Christian is.
Yes.
If I have the choice, I'm going to pick the person that at least is honest about where they're at.
Right.
You know, and I think that's the game you kind of juggle with Republicans and Democrats, right? Mm-hmm. You have to examine each one and say, are they really true to who they're saying they are? Right. I know Republicans in general are more Christian and follow Christian values in air quotes, you know.
They're more conservative. They tend to fall more on the conservative side of things.
Yeah. Which means I think Republicans, their whole thing is almost to like say no to a lot of things, right? It's like we don't like this, we don't like this, we don't like this.
Right.
You know, this is no, this is no.
Yeah.
And if you look at the opposite side of Democrats, it's like they're proud of how many things they say yes to. Right. Which both things are good, right? You got no to abortion over here.
Right.
That's a good thing.
Right.
Like, let's not kill babies.
Well, to some people, it's bad. It's a bad thing. Some people.
Yeah. But on the other hand, you have the Democrats who are like, let's support the poor. Let's make sure that we don't have people in the streets, you know, good things over there. So you have good things on both sides about both people. Right. And you really have to kind of balance, okay, if like, let's say there's a Democrat and yes, he's saying, yes, that abortion is a right that people have, right? But on the other hand, he has shown through his life he does very much care about people. He does care about the poor. He does care about helping people and making sure that we're not putting certain groups down, and like genuinely cares. Right. And you kind of see what importance they hold on both of those things. Is that person like super pro-abortion and then like the other stuff is minor? Or are they, they're pro-abortion, but like only because their party says so. Right. And, but they actually really care about the people, you know, those are the second person I would vote for. Right. Even if they said yes on abortion. Right. Because I feel like you want to elect people who are genuine. Yes. And as big as an issue of abortion is, it's not, there's one person does not make a difference in that debate, right? if you have one person that says, yes, I believe that abortion is a right, it's not going to convince mothers to go out and get an abortion. Is really what it is. Like, even if let's say abortion was legal across the entire United States, and it was just like, yeah, it's totally fine. You walk into a doctor and just get abortion. Right. That also doesn't mean that you're going to have women who are going to go in to get an abortion.
Right, because they have their own personal convictions about it anyway, right? Yeah.
So you're not necessarily just like creating more abortions because you said abortion is a right. Which it's a fine line to walk, of course. Like I personally, if I was elected, I would never, I'd say, no, that's wrong. I'm never voting. It's always going to be a no for me. Right. But I still respect people who say, I think it's a right. And I think it's just it's just a matter of like weighing their character. Right. So, like, for instance, I don't know. I really don't. I don't despise Biden. I think he's doing a fine job with where he's at, and I would agree he's probably not a Christian. Right. But also, like, have any
of them been though?
Yeah, exactly. Like what is the last president you can think of who was like actually Christian? Right. You get pretty slim pickings. Yeah. But like, I prefer to just look at the things they do and say, like, was that a good thing? Or was that something that a president should be doing? Was that going to affect change in a good way? Right. And I think, most presidents I can say, yeah, they did a pretty good job. Yeah.
I'm sure that's not an easy job.
No, it's not an easy job. Everything you say is criticized. Right. And I am going to say, like, I did not like Trump at all. I think his character really put me off as like, he's like, you claim to be a Christian and you are just saying awful things. Right. I mean, it's one thing to be a president that doesn't really, I don't know, they don't like bring their personal lives into it and like start ranting on the internet about things.
Well, the problem with Trump, right, is that he was like a 10-year-old in a 70-year-old's body, and he couldn't handle somebody making fun of him without retaliating. It's like, dude, you're the president of the United States. Just let him talk. Right. You don't need to get on Twitter and say, "Oh, you're a doo-doo head," and go back at him with some retort. It's like, come on, dude, you're a grown man. Right. And like, maybe his policy decisions were great or something, but like, for me, it's the character of a person, and his character was awful. So like, when I see someone like Biden, who's like, he's just a normal president, right? He might make decisions I don't agree with, but at least he's like cordial. Yeah. He's not going to like, blast people on the internet for stupid things. This is interesting because I think this is probably where you and I would definitely disagree. Because to me, I'm the opposite. Like,
very policy driven.
Well, in a sense, right? Like, so like, I use the example, I think even on one of these, I may have already said this on this podcast, but the example I've always used is if you need oral surgery done, like you have some teeth you need to extract and all this stuff, and you got two guys to choose from, and you got one who is the biggest jerk in the world. He says really mean things to people. He's just not a nice person. He says some sexist comments and all this, but
he's great at surgery,
right? But he's got a 95% success rate on the table. Yeah. And then there's this other guy who is the nicest guy in the world. I mean, you want to go hang out with him because he's just this nice old man. But you look at his record, and 3 out of 10 people die on his table, right? And you're like, I don't know. Like, as far as oral surgery, I want someone who's going to do the oral surgery and not kill me. I don't really care as much about his personality. Now, if I'm going to go with my family and go on a picnic, that's where I'm going to care about someone's personality. Right. I'm going to want someone who's going to be nice to my wife and my children. And I think I even said on the last time I talked about this is would I allow my family to go hang out with Donald Trump? No way. There's no way I would let my wife or kids anywhere near that man. You know what I'm saying? There's just no way. I mean, I probably wouldn't with Biden either. He might sniff him or something. You never know. But I mean, just in general. But I mean, like, as far as yes, like, what are they going to do for the country? And I guess when I look at what Trump did for the country, and if I can somehow just see past all the stupid things he said and all the tweets that he made that were mean and nasty and all that stuff, and just look at policy and then compare that to Biden, who, yes, he's a nice guy who likes ice cream, and that's great. But when I look at all the things that he's done so far, I'm like, oh, I don't know. I don't know if I think our country's in a better place politically and economically speaking and all these things than we were with Trump.
Right.
Now, do we have a nicer man in the White House? Absolutely. I mean, I would probably agree with everybody there and say, I mean,
be a better person to be at a dinner party with.
Right. So I mean, so that's why for me, and a lot of people are hoping Trump runs again for 2024, and I'm not one of those people.
It's like, give me someone that's like Trump, but in a different body.
Yes, so
has better manners.
Yes, right. So that's why I like DeSantis
and
from Florida.
Yeah,
that's who I like, because he's got the right policies in my view, and he's not a whiny little. He doesn't act like a little kid. Like he's not, you know what I mean? Like, and he stands by what he says. He says he's going to do something, he does it. Even when a lot of the world just rails on him and calls him Ron Death Santis and Ron to Satan and everything else, So does that mean he's perfect? Does that mean we're ever going to have a perfect person in the White House? No, because none of us are perfect.
Right.
But there's certain values in this country that seem to be going down the tubes in a lot of ways. And I'm looking for the person who's going to preserve those. I guess that's what conservative means, right? They're trying to conserve some of the values that have been around forever, you know. So anyway,
I think it's a really interesting debate, because on one hand, like I absolutely, if there was someone who agreed with my values and had a great character, and it didn't even matter if they're Republican or Democrat, whatever,
I'm with you there.
If they were there,
I don't care about that.
I would vote for them.
Right.
Yeah, for sure.
Right.
But then when you get to it's almost like we have a ranking, right? The top person on our list is like someone who agrees with my values and has a good character. Right. Yeah. And then we go down the list and we're like, okay, how do we rank? How do we rank someone that has great policies, terrible character, versus great character, terrible policies?
Right.
And that's where I think, I don't know. It really depends on how you weigh those things, and it's not one side versus another. It's especially so when Trump was president. One of the things that's really hard about that is, even if someone is making policies that make sense, they're doing things like in a correct manner in the White House, but everyone in the country views them a certain way, and he divided the country. I mean, pre-Trump versus post-Trump, I mean, the country was just split in half, right? These people hate each other. And I think that was never his policies that did that. It was his character. And so that's the thing, is presidents don't only affect the country in the way that they make laws. Right. And I think that's almost a minor thing. Right. It's the way they act. It's the way that they say, yes, this is the United States. This is what we stand for. This is, this is what we believe people should be like. Right.
But don't you think some of his policies tended to lead people to like, for a good example would be like the wall. The wall is something he ran on, right? He's like, when I get elected, I'm going to build a border wall, and of course everybody jumps on the fence, on the wall. They jump on the fence and they're like, okay, obviously this guy hates Mexican people. He hates immigrants. He hates, and then this whole thing goes, and then you have this whole like wave of everybody claiming that he's racist because he wants to build a wall. And I think that when you present something that way, that's going to divide. So, I mean, I would almost say that I think a lot of the divide took place because of the media narrative that was kind of painted around some of the things that he said.
Yeah, I would say he was not careful with his words. And so
I agree.
Part of the blame I would say most of the blame was on him for saying things just in a rash way, and people thinking that is what he believes. Right. He believes, like, you know, there have been comments that he's made that are racist, or like.
You think so? Okay. So,
yeah.
So let me ask you then. So I've asked multiple people this because I can't find any that I would say that I would think are actually like racist.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
I would say it's not blatantly racist things.
Right.
It's more like, for instance, I was listening to NPR about one of his speeches, and he was saying, you know, most Mexicans that come over the border are criminals. Right.
He used the word most though.
Yeah. Or he like gave us like a statistic.
He was talking about the border. If it's the thing I think you're talking about, he was talking about the border and the people crossing. And I think the quote was something along the lines of, murderers and rapists are coming over the border from Mexico. Right. I don't think he said the words, I think all Mexicans are murderers or rapists. No, most Mexicans are murderers and rapists, or most people that live in Mexico are murderers and rapists.
I think,
you know, it could have been 3 of them that came over the border, and the statement he made would still be true, right? So
it's, I think it was some statistic that was just completely made up about this percentage of people that come over the border illegally are like become criminals, and like, at face value, you look at it and you're like, oh, well, he got that statistic and that's a true statistic. But it's a misleading statistic. Right. And it's like, you listen to NPR and they're like, I don't know where he got this statistic from, but it's definitely not true. Right. It's like most people that come over the border illegally are not the people who tend to do illegal things in the United States because they don't want to get in trouble. Right.
They're usually low key. Right. They don't even want to be known that they're here.
Yeah. They want to stay low. They want to just do their jobs, get their money, send back their money to their kids. Right. And I think Trump had this way of almost like just making up facts and like painting people in a light that like was unfair. And I think that's in the way that I was thinking he was racist, is that he almost had this picture of them in his mind, and he was doing anything he could to like support that picture of them. Right. And I think,
well, it's like the country, was it Nicaragua, or I forgot, I don't remember what the country was, but he said they were S-holes or whatever, this S-hole country or whatever, and it's like, you know, and people took that and say, see what he's saying, he hates all the people that live there, and it's like, now, see, it's difficult because I can't sit there and say, I think what he said was a good thing to say. Right. I don't think it was a good thing to think. I think it was stupid. I think that was another example of Trump not thinking before he speaks and just being stupid and letting stuff fly out of his face that should never fly out of his face. But after the fact, if we break down what he said, can we say that was a racist statement? That's where I come to and I go, I don't think that was a racist statement. It was a stupid statement. Right. You know, just like saying that, you know, like you said, like the murderers and rapists are coming. Yeah. Because people may take that to mean, see, Trump says that all people that live in Mexico are all murderers and rapists. That's all they have over there. It's just murderers and rapists. He didn't say that, but people might take it that way. And they do take it that way, especially somebody like Donald Trump, who people are just waiting for him to slip up so they can run with it. Right. See, we told you he was this and he was that, you know. I know. So yeah, for sure. So I mean that's all I mean when I say I've never heard him make a racist claim. Right. I'm in no way saying I agree with everything he's ever said. I mean, I think he said so many stupid things. Yeah. But I've just never heard him say anything like, I hate Mexicans, or
of course not.
You know, I hate.
And most racists would never say that.
Well, some of them, like the staunch ones,
some would.
Right.
Yeah.
But see, that's the whole thing, right? Like, so people talk about like systemic racism, and they talk about how, you know, like you and I as white guys, right? We're born racist, right? There's just no, we're just, because we're born that way, we're born racist, which of course, as we know, is kind of a racist thing to say. Right. To assume somebody's racist based on the color of their skin is in and itself racist, right? Yeah. Like you need to point to something I did or said as being racist in order for you to claim I'm racist. You can't just say it's because of what you look like. Right. Because of what ethnicity you were born as. It's like, whoa, that's the definition of racism, right? That's no different than saying because you're this, right? So
yeah, I would say racist is a very strong word, because it does bring to mind someone who's someone who is blatantly like, I hate black people, you know? And
do those people exist? Yes.
Yeah. But maybe instead of saying people are racist when they make decisions like Trump made, you know, where he's like, you know, I think, you know, 70% of illegal immigrants that come over to this country are criminals.
Right.
It's like they might be prejudiced. Like, in other words, they have preconceived notions in their mind that they're working off of that are untrue.
Right.
Right. And that's what I think the gist of it is when people call other people racist, they're not necessarily saying, you said this thing that was just blatantly like black people are all like this or whatever. Right. But it's like they're trying to point out you have this assumption about people that's untrue and it's unfair.
Right.
And I think that's where people but then they still use the term racist, which is pretty extreme. Right. For that, I think it would be they are uninformed, like they are prejudiced. They make decisions based on untrue facts.
Right.
Like they're just not a true a person who sees things from other people's sides. Basically.
Well, it's almost like a stereotype, right, or like a profile, and I look at it that way because I have friends who are like police officers.
Right.
And a lot of times people will say, well, you know, you can't assume somebody's doing something wrong based on what they look like, right? And I understand the sentiment behind that statement, but, you know, I talk to my friends who are police officers and they say, well, you have to profile.
You have to.
Because the thing is, if 9 out of 10 or even 8 out of 10 of the guys that you pull over that look the part, you know, let's say they're all tatted out and they're, you know, they just kind of got the look or whatever, happen to be doing something illegal, and you've seen that in your line of work all the time, then you can't help but wonder, right? And you pull them over, and then if you score gold 8 out of 10 times, and you're just going to keep doing that, and somebody say, well, that's not right because the two guys that look like that aren't doing anything wrong. I said, you're right. And in a sense,
but also that was
wrong.
their choice, right? They got tattooed.
Well, right.
Knowing that.
Yes. But
you're not going to look.
Like if I looked a certain role, like if I look, let's say I look like that guy, and I get pulled over all the time or whatever, just comply with the cops.
Right.
They'll whatever they got to do, and then they'll let you go.
Right.
You know, don't start mouthing off.
Right.
Don't say
you made the decision.
Yeah. Right. You know what I mean? But But I think their argument would be like, but just because I make the decision to get a bunch of tattoos doesn't mean I'm a serial killer.
Yeah.
You know?
And unfortunately, it that same argument doesn't really work for skin color. Of course, you're born black. You cannot do anything about that.
Right.
It is unfair to be pulled over more than other people just because you're black. Right. Of course. Right. But I got an analogy. So you're going to a bank, walking in a bank. You have a black beanie on, you have a face mask, you have you're dressing the part for like a bank robber.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Of course people are going to be suspicious. They should be suspicious, right?
You could just be there to withdraw $20 out of your own account.
Right. I just like dressing this way, right? I like dressing in all black in a jumpsuit with a black backpack.
It's just your style, man.
It's just my style.
Yeah.
You know, like
fashion statement.
Like it is totally unfair to be like, well, why are you suspicious of that person?
Right.
Because they're dressing the part, right?
Right.
Versus like, and it doesn't matter if they're white or black or whatever. If you're dressing that way, that tells a story of what your intentions are. Right. If I'm walking down the street, I see a black kid in a hoodie that's hunched over, that's like, you know, it's like, that's suspicious. And it doesn't matter if they're black or white. If there was a white kid doing the same thing,
yes,
I would still be like, what is that kid doing?
Right.
Because they're hiding from people. They're, you know, versus like seeing a black man walk down the street with like normal clothes on. I'm not going to be like, oh, what is he doing? Because it's like, he's not dressing the part.
That's a great point.
Right.
That's a great point.
And people confuse those two things where like, you know, police officers are pulling over these people who look shady, like they dress shady.
Right.
And that's something they can help, right? They don't have to be dressed like that.
Right.
It's because the police officers have seen people that are criminals that are dressed like that.
Right.
And it's just, you know, if you dress like a criminal, you should probably assume people are going to think you might be a criminal. Right. Right. But
doesn't mean you are.
Doesn't mean you are. No, of course. And I would hope that even if you were, that a police officer would have enough tact to feel out the situation and really figure out, are you someone who really is a criminal, or are you just dressing like that?
Right.
Of course, because it's so prevalent now that police officers have to do that. Right.
That's a great, dude. That's such a good analogy, because I've never really thought about that before, but I'm just picturing myself, if I'm walking down a street at night and I'm coming up to a group of guys, right? Let's say there's 6 of them, and one's white, one's black, one's Hispanic, one's Chinese, right? Let's put all these different things in there, but they're all dressed a certain way, and they look mean, right? They look like they're getting into trouble. Maybe they're not. Maybe they're the nicest guys in the world. Maybe they're having a Bible study right there. For all I know, right?
You never know.
I have no idea. But from the looks of it, it makes me nervous. Right. So when I walk by them, I involuntarily get nervous.
Yeah.
It has nothing to do with their skin color or their ethnicity or anything else. It has to do with the way they look altogether right there. They look menacing to me. Right. Now, most likely, especially in our area, I'll walk right by them. Everything's fine. Maybe one of them look up and say, "Hey, how's it going, man?" I'll say, "Oh, pretty good. How are you?" And keep on going. Right.
Yeah, and you're like, that was surprising.
Yeah, right. Yeah. But at the same time, I can't help but feel nervous.
No, of course.
Because of just, you know.
Because there's a pattern. Because people that dress like that, or I should say, many criminals who you've seen on TV who are arrested dress like that.
Right. Right.
And it's like, that dress almost says to people, I'm not going to be a part of your groups. I'm not going to conform. I'm not going to play by the rules. Right. You know, and that's a scary thing. You see someone who their dress says, I'm not going to play by the rules. I'm going to do my own thing. And it's like, I don't know if that person really respects the law. I don't know if they really respect me. Right. So it's like, but then let's say, I don't know, there's a black guy walking down the street, same hoodie up, all that stuff. But right next to him, he has wife and kids. Right. Totally different. Changes the dynamic. Right. You'd be like, that's odd he's dressed that way, because it seems like he's trying to be like criminal type. But like, I can see from his wife and kids, like I'm not going to be worried about it. As much. Yeah. Right? You know, it's not to say that the whole family's not a bunch of hoodlums, because that could be too. Yeah. You never know. You almost kind of relax a little bit, because like, oh, he's a family man. Yeah. Right. Again, having nothing to do with his skin color or anything else. It's just like, oh, okay, I see he's got his kids there. You know, like for me, one of the things that I always struggle with, which is, I know it's kind of ridiculous, but I don't like my kids being around like profanity. So if ever we're in a public place or whatever, and I see, like we're at a restaurant, and again, I don't do this on purpose, but sometimes I scope it out and I'm like, okay, what kind of people are sitting around me? And a lot of times if I see a family, again, doesn't matter what color they are, family, I go, okay, he's got little kids there too. He's probably not going to be F-bombs. But I've been totally blindsided before, right? Happens. And I'm going, dude, your kids, you know, but that's just the way some people don't care about that at all. Like it's just normal to them, and you know, and they just, you know, which is foreign to me, because even if I used that language, I would still know, okay, I'm in a public place. I'm around a bunch of people I don't know. They might be offended by some of the things I'm saying. So I'm not going to use that language out here in public. If I'm hanging out with my friends at my house, fine. You know, I'm going to let it rip, whatever, because we all speak the same way. We're going to talk like that. But yeah, I've always been kind of flabbergasted by people that go out in public. And in fact, I just went the other day, had lunch and somewhere, and this guy's just, I mean, it was one of those every other word kind of guys. And this restaurant was small, but it was full. Right. And I'm looking, there's little kids over here. There's little kids over here. And I'm going, and he's just, I mean, it's one thing to be like that. Yeah. Around your friends. Right. It's another thing to be like that around when you can see other small children and families. Right. and you still don't care. Like, that's just
right. But that's what I mean. I don't think they think about it.
No,
I don't think they sit there and go, "Oh, I bet that those people are really upset at me using this language, and I'm going to keep doing it." I don't even think it's a thought that even goes in their head, because to them, those words are no different than any other words.
Right.
Right. They don't see it as a bad thing, you know, and maybe it's just they grew up, their parents talk to them like that all the time, and it just kind of, it's no different than saying table or cup or, you know, whatever. You know?
And that's another thing. It's like, it's not just about appearance. It's about how someone talks too.
Right.
How are they talking politely? If they're talking politely, that pretty much immediately diffuses any tension.
Yeah.
Right. You see someone with a hood walking down, and they're like, "Oh, good morning." Yeah. Immediately, you're like, "Oh, I like that person."
Right. You're like, "Hey, you want to get lunch?"
Right. And you're like, I no longer have any reservations about that person. Right. Yeah. And it's the same thing, you know. And even if I was in like Bakersfield, and there's certain parts of Bakersfield,
hopefully you wouldn't be, but
well, my wife's family lives in Bakersfield.
Oh wow.
Yeah. So
and
we
you
go
married her anyway.
Yeah, I did.
Wow,
yeah.
dude. Wow. Brave man.
She had a dairy farming family.
Oh, nice.
So a little bit different than like the typical Bakersfield.
Okay.
Then you think
but it's hot over there, man.
Oh yeah, it's crazy.
It's disgustingly hot over there.
It's horrible.
Ugh.
But if you're in certain parts of Bakersfield, can't remember what the Oildale.
Oh, okay.
If you've ever been to Oildale?
Yeah.
I don't feel safe in that town.
No.
It's all white people.
Okay.
I don't. There's people that are like, you know, wife beaters walking around with like chainsaws, and you're just like, no,
wow,
nope, don't feel safe here.
Yeah,
and that's what we should view it like. We also shouldn't have the opposite of like, oh, he's white, he's fine. Right.
Like, because
he's a white person, he's not going to get in trouble.
Like, and that's exactly the point, right? It really doesn't matter. That doesn't matter. What matters more is culturally, like how is the person raised? What do they believe in? What's their life philosophy? But of course, you don't know all those things just seeing somebody from afar, right? You have to sit down with somebody like you and I are doing right now in order to learn all those things about somebody, you know. But like you were saying, I think it always takes two, right? You're talking about like someone just saying good morning to you, just totally smooths things over. But I mean, even look like fights people get into, like at a bar. Right, two guys are drunk. One guy I saw you looking at me down at the end of the bar. Now, at that moment, it can go two different ways. The guy who's being addressed can say, "Oh no, man, I'm sorry. I wasn't looking at you. I was doing this." And then most likely, the first guy's gonna be like, "Oh, okay." Right. He's gonna go sit down. Yeah. But more often, right, the guy's also drunk. He's also masculine, and he's like, "Oh, I can look at you if I ever want to." And the guy goes, "Oh, really?" You know, and then pretty soon they're throwing blows. You know, and they're out in the parking lot and all this. It's like that's why I mean, it's like most conflicts like that can be resolved if one of the two people just says, "Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry about that, man. I didn't mean to stare at you. I'm sorry if I offended you. I mean no harm." You know, and then immediately that guy de-escalates. Yeah. And he's like, "Oh, okay, good. I thought this guy was really staring me down, but you know, now I'm going to buy him a beer." Yeah. It's just like,
and I have that problem with my kids.
Right.
It's like they start escalating. It's like, one of you could just say sorry.
Yeah, exactly.
One of you could just say, this isn't a big deal. Like, it's just, I'm sorry.
It is a big deal, dude, to them.
Everything's a big deal.
It's just the end of the world, man. Yeah. She stole my seat. Yeah. That's the worst. Sure, there's 4 other seats in here, but that one was mine. Yeah. You know? End of the world. Oh, gosh. That's what I had to tell him yesterday. I said, can you guys even sit in the same room for 5 seconds without starting to bicker at each other? I mean, it's ridiculous. It's horrible.
Yeah,
so.
That's probably the worst part about my life right now. Being honest, listening to my kids
fatherhood is the worst part of my life right now.
Yeah, pretty much. I enjoy everything else.
Yeah, they're still so young though, dude.
No,
I mean, and in your situation, I mean, coming in later in their lives, right? I mean, that's challenging as it is. You know, adopting children is. I mean, I admire that a lot because I'm like, man, I can't even. It's hard enough when you raise them from babies. I can't even imagine doing what you and Leah are doing.
Yeah, you raise them and then they start bickering and you're like, yeah, that's probably my fault.
Right.
Versus like you adopt them and they're like, that wasn't my fault.
Yeah,
I hate
like,
it.
Who are their parents? Yeah. What genetics do they have going on here?
It's not my fault.
Yeah.
No,
totally,
I'm just kidding.
That's it's rough. I mean, that age is hard right now, especially you got a boy and a girl that are close in age.
Yeah.
You know, and
it's a pain.
Yeah, that's hard, dude.
It would be different if it was an older boy, younger girl too. I mean,
right.
The younger boy and the older girl. Oof.
Yeah.
Not a good combination.
Yeah.
But anyways, we were talking about. What were we talking about?
I don't know. We've been all over the place.
Yeah.
We were in the category of politics,
Racism.
And then
we got all that. Okay.
Got through all that. All right. What do we have? Is there anything else you want to talk about as far as political
Politics?
or yeah?
Let's see. What are the big issues? We already got abortion.
Oh, let me ask you that. Let me ask you. That's a question I always try to ask too. Is what do you see as the most important issue that faces our country and our world right now? I know that's kind of a broad.
I think probably if you look at history, the best times for countries are when there is the most religious freedom. And it goes both ways. You have the church in power, never ends well. You have church being persecuted, never ends well. Right? You always want a balance of, no, anyone can believe anything they want.
Right.
As long as they're not, being horrible people to other people.
Well, see that's interesting, right? So,
or at least they're not committing crimes. I mean,
right.
Of course, you could say whatever you want.
You see what I'm saying? But like even then, even you start committing crimes, right? Like that even gets. I don't know. Go ahead.
It depends on your definition of crime, right?
Right.
Of course.
Well, I mean, there is crime that's like something against the law, something illegal is a crime, right? Even if we don't agree with that law, or but. It all comes down to like really like when we say, well, because people always say this, I don't care what you believe, I don't care what you what you hold to as far as your philosophies on life, as long as you don't hurt anyone else.
Right. But what's your definition of hurt?
Right.
Yeah.
And that's what a friend of mine explains it. And he says, this that sliding scale that keeps getting pushed all over the place. Like, what does that mean? To me, like hurting somebody would mean physically hurting them.
Right.
Right. Like you can believe in whatever religion you want, but if your religion says that it's part of your job as a religious person to go around and punch people in the face. Yeah. I would say no. Right.
Yeah,
you don't do that.
You are personally.
But now we're in this age where it's like words are hurtful.
Right.
And my beliefs in and of themselves can be hatred towards you, or can be violence. They say words are violence. It is ridiculous.
Because you cannot, on one hand, physical violence, you can very clearly draw a line.
Yes. Right.
It's like, yes, you touched me.
Right.
And it hurt. Yeah. It left this mark. Look at this cut here.
Right.
That's you know, you could say, yeah, there's a clear line. Versus people disagreeing with each other. You cannot. I mean, yeah, I'm definitely a strong believer in freedom of speech.
Yes.
If someone's going to be an idiot and say absolutely hurtful things to everyone around them,
right?
It's not a criminal.
No.
He's not going to have any friends.
Right.
No one's going to like him.
Right.
That is his consequence for doing that, right?
You would say he has the right to do so.
Right.
But he does not have the right to go over and hurt somebody physically.
Right.
And I would agree with that.
And of course, there is kind of a gray line versus like threatening to hurt someone, because then you're making them scared for their life,
Right.
Like, I'm going to come to your house next week and stab you.
Right. Right.
Yeah, that's a crime.
Yeah.
Versus, I think your lifestyle's wrong and you should feel bad.
Right.
That's not directly threatening you with violence. So,
right. But some people see it as that.
Right.
Right. Like if I make a claim and say that, I think I disagree with this particular lifestyle or whatever the case may be. And they say, well, you can't believe that because that hurts the feelings of this whole group of people. And I'm like, I'm not purposely trying to hurt anybody's feelings. Right. That's just what I believe personally. Right. And I respect their right to believe the opposite of that. And that's totally fine. My feelings aren't hurt because they believe the different than me.
Yeah.
That's fine. Right. But
and if you look at it, I always like to look at things from the other perspectives because, let's say you are gay, you're part of the gay community, and you get this feeling like everyone around you is always saying things that are like condemning your lifestyle, right?
Right.
You feel like you're surrounded by people who are negative towards you, right? You feel like that environment you're in is an environment where you don't feel safe because you feel like everyone around you hates you because of the way you act, right? I would say still not a crime, but we should still feel for that person, right? We should say your feelings are valid.
Yes.
Like you feel hurt, and that is okay to feel hurt. It doesn't mean anyone around you is doing anything wrong or criminal. Maybe wrong, but not criminal.
Right.
But, you know, we should still validate that feeling of not just be dismissal, you know, of people.
I'm with you.
For their
I'm totally with you. Yeah.
There's a difference,
right,
in making it a crime and then saying, yes, this is an actual concern, but it's not a crime.
Right.
So
right. So if I was to say, I believe a biological man is a man and a biological woman is a woman, and I make that statement, and then there's a whole community of people that would say that's hate speech. It's where in my mind, to me, that's just reality. That's science. That's biology. I'm not trying to hurt anybody, but now.
But even if you were saying it in a way
to be hurtful,
right, it still wouldn't be a crime.
Correct.
Because you're just some guy on the internet.
I would agree with you.
Right.
But that doesn't mean that I don't care about those people. It doesn't mean I don't care about their feelings, or that I don't, that I wish any kind of harm on them or anything else. We all have our things, right? I mean, like you said earlier, none of us are without fault. You know, we all have issues. But to me, even saying that that's a fault or an issue would already bring a firestorm on me.
Right.
What do you mean it's a fault? It's not a fault. That's who they are. Or it's not an issue. What are you calling it an issue for? It's not an issue. And it's like, so it's like, it's getting to the point where you can't even really talk about anything anymore without
because
bringing all this wrath on yourself.
Disagreeing about those things feels like hate to them.
Right.
I think it's because they associate speech like that with this picture in their mind of people who are out with pitchforks.
Yes.
Coming to
Westboro
get
Baptist.
people, right? And that's the thing. It's like they have a skewed perspective of people who disagree with them.
Right.
You know, they think these people are saying this, and they really do feel like they want to come to my house and murder me, but they're just like holding themselves back.
Right.
They're like they're just out there like talking all this because they're like they want us to feel threatened.
Yes.
And like they really would come to my house and stab me if the purge happened. Right. You know?
I'd be the first to go.
Right?
Yeah.
But like in actuality, those people, if you meet them in person, would probably be totally fine.
Right.
And that's what's really it's really hard because some people act online completely different.
Oh, because they hide behind their username.
Right.
Totally.
And they say
horrible things. It's like
they
you would never say that
in person.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly. If you were face to face with a gay person, you would never say to their face, like, I think you're going to hell.
Right.
Like you would just never say that. Right. Like, or at least not a sane person.
What if they asked you though?
Am I going to hell?
Well, if they asked you, hey, I live a homosexual lifestyle.
Right.
You're a Christian.
What do you believe?
What do you think, if I continue in this lifestyle from here until the time I die, what would you say about my afterlife? See, if somebody asked me that way, I would be honest with them.
Right. But you would try to be as gentle as possible.
Of course, because it's out of love. It's not out of hatred. It's not like I'm trying to say, oh, yeah, you're going to hell and I'm glad because the world's going to be rid of morons like you. Like, no, that's not the way I would feel about it all. I would be like, I think that might be where you end up, and I'm heartbroken over that.
Right.
That kills me to think that. I don't want you there.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So that's kind of, but I think approval is another word, right? There was a debate one time that I was watching, and he said the whole idea of the debate was, does love require approval? And then you had some people from the LGBTQ community that were on one side, and I think it was a couple Christian guys on the others. Of course, that's always who they pit against each other. On the other side, and he said in the very beginning of the debate, right, that one of the Christian guys is talking to one of the LGBT people, and he says, okay, the whole point of this debate is that love requires approval, right? And the people say, yep. And he says, okay, you know that over here we're Christians, right? And they say, yeah. And he says, do you guys love us? And they said, yes, of course we love you. We totally love you. And he says, well, do you approve of our position that homosexuality is sinful?
Right.
And they said, no, we don't approve of that. And he says, you just lost the debate. And he turned around and walked away, right? Because your whole point is that love requires approval, yet you're saying you love us, but you don't approve of our position that goes against yours, right? So it's just so funny to me how some groups can paint something out as if it's so easy, cut and dry. This is the way it is. And then when you turn it to apply the same rules to them, they fail.
Right.
And it's like, whoa. I thought you said, oh, no, only if it's on our side. We only want that on our side. Yeah. We don't want it over here. It's just like,
and as Christians, I think we have to be very careful to not be hypocritical.
Yeah.
Totally. We have to be like,
totally.
Oh, this same rule applies to me. Yes. For sure. I'm horrible at this.
Right.
Love your neighbor as yourself. Yeah, I don't do that. I'm terrible.
Right.
I like.
What if you hate yourself? Then it's easy.
Yeah.
I hate my neighbor because I hate myself. There.
Yeah, I'll just hate everyone equally.
Yeah.
It's fine. But yeah, it's just like we as Christians also need to realize that we also aren't like the holders of all truth. We don't know everything.
Right.
Sometimes we meet non-Christians that have really good points that absolutely demolish our arguments.
Yeah.
And it's because they're right. And it's because we didn't know the truth the first time.
Yes.
And we need to not be like, oh, I believe this thing and like it applies to you, but not to me.
Right.
And
so what does that do to somebody like you though? I'm guessing if you're like me, it makes you go look into it. Right?
Oh, yeah,
like,
for sure.
They brought up a good point.
Yeah.
I didn't have an answer for that. I'm going to look into the point they're making. Maybe I'll come away from it and be like, wow, they were totally right. I'm going to abandon this whole Christianity thing and move on to something else, right? Because they proved me wrong, right? That could be. Or you might, through that, come out even stronger and be like, oh, there is a good answer to that question that he asked, even though I didn't know it on the spot. And that person might walk away going, stupid Christian, I told him he didn't have an answer.
And that's why it's so important when you're talking with non-Christians to not have an attitude of like, let's debate because I know how to prove you wrong. I think it's really important, and I talked to the youth group about this, is to have an attitude of I am going to be mostly wrong most of the time.
Right.
I think having that attitude coming in is so disarming for people because they're like, wait, you're just admitting you're wrong on
what's
things?
The point of even debating it then?
Yeah.
Why even talk about it?
But you're like, hey, let's figure it out. I want to know what you think. And maybe I can share about what I think, and maybe we can figure out some more truth between both of us having both flawed perspectives, right? And I think, coming at it from that perspective make people feel more like their opinion matters and you're not just in a debate team.
Right.
No one's convinced by a debate. Right. You're not like, I'm going to tell you these facts about the Bible. And then the person's like, oh, dang, that's true. I should believe. that's like, I've never seen that happen.
Right.
It's always from conversion stories I've heard. It's always, these people were Christians. They were so kind to me. And I couldn't understand why they were so kind, why they had so much love. Right. It's not, and then I went home and I looked up all these things and then I became a Christian. Right. Right. It's not this person. I went over to their house. They really convinced me. Right. That all the scientific evidence points toward Christianity. And then I went online and I found out Christians are nice.
Like that was after the fact.
Right? Like you don't. Yeah. It's never that.
No, you're right. You're right. I mean, I think I have seen instances where people are won over by that, but those are the kind of people that are very science minded. They're kind of a lot of times we all know it's a heart response no matter what, but they also have this intellectual block. Right. Where they're like, okay, well, I've been taught my whole life that there is no God and that evolution proves there is no God and that, all this science goes against God, it goes against the Bible, all this kind of thing. So when they're stuck kind of in that mindset, I think it is helpful for them to see maybe some apologetics courses, or hear somebody
Definitely.
that is a PhD scientist who's also a Christian kind of explain some of these arguments that go,
you can kind of tell the kind of person,
right.
the way they talk to you. Are they asking you legitimate questions about Christianity? Mm-hmm. And you have two types of people. You really have the people that are convinced that all of the morals and truths in the Bible make sense, right? You have like love your neighbor as yourself, love God, being self-sacrificial. Like all those things sound really nice to them, but they're just stuck, like you said, they're stuck on this thing of, I'm not really sure the proof is there. Right. And I think you can usually tell that when you talk to someone, if they're being open, they're being cordial with you, and they're asking legitimate questions, then I would say, yeah, don't just be kind. Right. Like answer their questions, right? Like, give them good answers.
Yeah. Well, as the Bible says, be ready to give an answer to anybody who asks you. Right?
Yeah. And
not that necessarily means scientific stuff, but I know it's just for the hope that's within you, which the answer could be just simply Jesus.
Yeah.
But you would think that that's going to spark some more questions, because if somebody came up to me and said, hey, why do you have so much hope? And I just said, Jesus. And they said, oh, great, I'm going to go become a Christian. Sounds good. Where's this Jesus? Can I get some of him too? It's like,
yeah, you have to definitely explain yourself.
Yeah. So, I mean, what I'm curious to know, and this is something I plan on asking any other Christians that I have on this podcast, just what is your, like, if I came to you and I was a non-believer and I said, all right, Colby, I want you to, I'm kind of on the fence with this Christianity thing. It sounds really cool. I like the idea of it, but I mean, is there really any proof? Is there really any evidence for any of the things you believe? I mean, you believe in this book that was written thousands of years ago by a bunch of guys that are long dead. I've heard there's a bunch of contradictions in it, and I heard it was just written by men to be a crutch, and you guys need it for, you know the list of arguments that people would make. So if somebody came to you with that kind of philosophy, but they really did seem like they wanted, they were genuine. They really wanted to know some answers to these questions. How would you begin with that person?
I would probably start by asking them a few questions. Maybe ask them, what is it, what is it about Christianity that, doesn't have enough proof for you? And I would say, like, if it really is just that there's not something directly in front of you that you can point to and say, there's God over there, then I would say, look at all the other things that you believe happened in history, in history books. Look at all the other people you trust that said, this happened to me, and you trust them. You trust that person, right? And you didn't see it yourself, but you know it's true because you trust that person and that person saw it, right? And then kind of point them to, like, the Bible is extremely well preserved, is extremely well documented. Many people, many trustworthy people, and the reason they're trustworthy is because in their document they say, I screwed up. Right. It
shows all the flaws, right?
Yeah. They're like, I denied Christ 3 times, or I doubted when Christ came back.
You think you'd eliminate that stuff if you were trying to.
You would, like, if you're trying to convince people. Right. I would say the Bible is, no one would make it up. No one would make it up because it doesn't do anyone any good. It doesn't. The leaders, like, let's say you wrote this book for fun to get people into a religion, and you wanted to, I don't know, get a lot of people to follow you into something, right? You wouldn't put in the book, don't store up treasures on earth. You'd be like, well, yeah, it would be like, give all your money to me, and you'll have stable. And then you'll have a nice mansion in heaven, and I get 7 wives. You guys don't. You guys are celibate. You're all celibate. You have to
give your wives to me.
Yes, I need them. if it was made up, you'd
Right.
see stuff like that.
Right.
You'd see legends, you'd see like just ridiculous tales. You'd get people like Peter. You would have them, have ridiculous like insight into things. And like, if you were just making up a religion, you would try and make it seem as credible as possible,
Right.
by having people be as good as possible in the book.
Right.
Right.
But
what we get is a whole bunch of flawed people that are all writing the book themselves and then get killed over it.
Right.
Like, if you were going to get killed over something you wrote that was fake,
Right.
you'd probably be like, okay.
Right.
I made it all up. I'm sorry. I made it all up. Okay. Would you go tell everyone that you made this up, that you were misleading everyone?
Right.
Yeah, I should probably do that.
Yeah.
Because I messed all these people's lives up.
Right. Well, that's the best, to me, that's the best proof that at least the people that wrote the Bible believed it was true.
Oh, yeah.
Because, you look at the early disciples, they all died martyrs' deaths. Now, people say, well, yeah, but there's lots of religions where people will go to their deaths and say, yeah, but they believe it's true, right? Like, if we're making the claim that the disciples knew it was all phony, knew that Jesus didn't really raise from the dead, and they hid his body somewhere, like as all the claims make, if they knew all that,
they wouldn't die from
Do you really think they would continue on to the point of torturous death?
Right.
Not just like gas chamber death. We're talking like excruciatingly painful, days on end until you die kind of death.
Right.
There's no way. I mean, for something false that you knew was false, no.
And it's different because, something like Islam, you have the Bible twisted in certain ways to agree with certain things, to point towards Muhammad. And then you have, after the fact, people years later dying for that cause.
Right.
But that's because they're not the ones that wrote that in the first place. They're not, they believe it,
Right.
but they have no knowledge of like, who wrote this and why, so you really can't make the argument that the disciples made this up.
Right.
You could say they were delusional, I suppose. But then that's what I would say is, like, if I was going to convince someone, I would write up on a whiteboard. I would say, okay, what are the options? What are the options for what the Bible is, where it came from?
Right.
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 There's a few options. There's, it was like this simple document that got morphed into a bunch of different things and like turned into what it is now. And now everyone believes it.
Right.
Well, we have historical evidence to say that that's definitely not true.
Right.
Even from extra biblical sources. So let's just take that off the table.
Right.
You have the option that the disciples made this up, but again, they died for what they believed, and there were tons of witnesses. So like, you can't have someone make something up when there's tons of people around that would just say like, you're full of crap. Like,
Right.
There's,
Right.
they're like,
Yeah.
I was with Jesus. He didn't do that.
Right.
So
Right.
that's also off the table. You also have the option that maybe Jesus was just a con man. He was just really good at like fooling people.
Right.
What in the world would he get out of that?
Yeah.
I mean, you're kind to everyone around you and then you die.
Right.
And like, you have a weird, like, yeah, I'm just going to convince a bunch of people to follow me.
Yeah. And
like,
then die at age 33.
It doesn't make sense.
Right.
And even then, there's things you can't explain. There are things he did that you cannot explain that there were witnesses for.
Right.
So that pretty much eliminates all the options except it's true. Right. And that's what I would point to is like, do you see any other options?
Right.
And can you prove them to me? Because I don't think there are. I don't, I've looked at all the explanations for this. I don't think any of the other explanations have any kind of evidence behind them.
Right.
So like, and that's apologetically, of course, what you would do, give them an example, but you would also say like, I've known so many people that have had the same experience of their life absolutely being changed. I've seen people who I mean, everyone has the same underlying kind of feeling of something missing in their life. That's there for a reason. It's not just evolutionarily something we developed as like to always feel like we need a purpose.
Right.
You know?
Right.
Well, that doesn't make sense. Just like, why would we be here and having these thoughts if there wasn't a God? You know, like it really doesn't make sense.
Well, that gets into like the intelligent design, right? Like the idea that, I mean, I'm at the point now where I'm convinced, obviously I believe in Jesus. I believe that the Bible's true, but, and I'm not saying that anybody that doesn't believe that is got something wrong, but I'm at the point where I think that anybody that doesn't at least bare minimum believe in intelligent design, there's something wrong there. Yeah. Because to me, there's no other, like nothing else makes sense. You cannot look at everything that we have and just assume it randomly, like with no intelligence behind it, just appeared. Right. I mean, there's just way too much language in it, right? Like you look at DNA, you look at like all, it's just beautiful. Like all these things that are here that we need and our body needs them. And it just, there's just random chance seems like too far of a jump, you know?
If that was true, so if it were true that we came about randomly, you know, and you consider, let's say there's just infinite universes, there's infinite possibilities, there's infinite chances for life to happen. Right. Right. What are the chances out of all of those chances that we are the ones that can sit around and intelligently discuss things with each other? Like, why aren't we in a world that sucks? Right. That's on fire all the time. Right. That's, you know, like,
well, some might argue and say we are.
Yeah. I mean, you could say fire, some parts suck.
Yeah. We're to say we are in a world that sucks.
Yeah. But if you look at everything around us, it's like things could be so much worse for life. Right. And chances are, if you throw a dart at a dartboard and say like at any of the, you know, possibility, any of the main like universes of different possibilities for life, that we happen to be in one where everyone is like relatively comfortable. The things that have to line up for that, I mean, like the things that have to line up for life in the first place are like insane. Right. But even if you said like, well, like given infinite time, given infinite universes that life could arise, why is it we're in a version of that's so good? Right. Why isn't like every day a struggle to like fight, you know, fire breathing dragons that eat like half the population? You know, like, or even why is it relatively good?
Why is it? Why don't we live in a world where we can't even breathe the air? Right. Or all the food that we find to eat, 80% of it is poison. Yeah. You know, or like things like that. Why is it so perfectly designed
for us?
And I mean, when I say perfectly, I don't mean like, obviously the fall happened and there's issues here, obviously. But I mean, perfectly in the sense that our body just happens to need certain vitamins, minerals, and that just happens to be in the food that's here. We need to breathe a certain kind of air that just happens to be here. We need to drink water that also happens to be here. You know, it just seems too designed to say there was no designer. You know, it's just, to me, it's ludicrous.
If it was true, I would expect we would be blobs eating every other blob we could find. Yeah,
until there was the biggest blob ever.
Until there's the biggest blob. And like just fighting to survive every moment of it, or every second. You know, like that would be life. Yeah. Most likely we'd be amoebas just eating everything, you know, not where we are now. Right. So,
well, unless those amoebas evolved into, you know, fish, and then fish to chickens, and then, you know the deal.
Yeah.
So how do you? Yeah, well, let's go there real quick before we close up here. Yeah. Where do you go with that one? If somebody comes in, I mean, I know you come from a schooled, educated background, as does your wife. She's even a teacher, right?
She's a
biology teacher. So I mean, you're pretty ingrained in that already. So if someone comes to you and says, "I don't believe in God because I believe evolution,"
I would say, and one of the things I told the youth group recently too is, don't just disagree with people and say like everything you think is dumb.
Even if it is, you don't want to.
Even if it is,
you don't want to say that.
You still want to pick out things that you agree with. Right. You want to find common ground with people.
Right.
And I think that's the same thing with evolution. Is certain parts of evolution are true. Like, I think animals are definitely given the ability to adapt to their environments.
So that's micro, right?
They can, microevolution.
Right.
They can change themselves to adapt to an environment.
Right. Like beaks changing, like Darwin's finches, that
exactly.
thing. Right.
Things like that. I mean, you have varieties of dogs to show that.
Yes.
Obviously.
Right.
They can change.
Which I think most Christians would agree with.
Right.
Right. They agree with microevolution or adaptation.
Right.
But it's when you get into the one kind turning into another kind, that's which is what macroevolution. So that's, And
I would say to someone who believes in macroevolution, just look up on Wikipedia how much fossil evidence there is to support that.
Right.
And you will be like, wait, what?
Yeah.
This is it? There's like a few bones here and there that someone said, yeah, this is like a pre-human. And not like a monkey that just went extinct. Like how do you know that? It's like, I don't know. It's like someone putting a bunch of newspapers up on a wall and putting the strings between them. Yeah. And you look at the newspapers and you're like, these aren't related at all.
Yeah, where's the connections?
Yeah, there's no connections. You just put strings. That's the same thing with evolution. It's like, sure, I believe that all those fossils are real.
Yeah, but if that's true, why do they so staunchly stand and say, oh no? I mean, I even had a biology teacher when I was at Hancock, and she even told me, oh, there's no holes in the fossil record. There's no missing links. There's no missing links at all. And I said, really?
Yeah.
Can you show me that there's no missing links? And then she pointed me to some other book which I read, and of course nowhere in there did it even talk about missing links or anything like that. No, of course,
yeah. And it's like they believe it because they don't want to believe anything else, really. Right. It's like,
and that's really what it is, right? I mean, and it's true for some religious people as well, where they say, no, I want there to be a God. I grew up in the church. I believe in this religion, and I don't want to hear any evidence contrary to that. Which, I mean, I think on both sides is wrong. We should always be open to that, right? Do you know the story of Nebraska Man? You just reminded me of it when you're talking about this bone here and this bone here. They found a tooth. I think it was Nebraska Man. I might be wrong on which Neanderthal, if it was even a Neanderthal. They found a tooth. And they said, this tooth belonged to Nebraska Man. And they put this whole display where here he is with his family, and he's got the tools and they're cooking, and this whole big display, right? Nebraska Man, all based on a tooth. And I'm like, that's all they had was a tooth. Yeah. And I'm like, first, I mean, bare bones, you're like, dude, that's bad science. Oh yeah. You cannot develop this big diorama of a time in history based on a tooth. So you're already kind of off on the wrong foot. Right. Well, years later, they find out that the tooth belonged to a pig. Right. It wasn't even a human tooth. Like, it was a pig tooth. And I'm like, so then of course they have to take all that down and be like, but then some textbooks still have it in there, and they're still promoting as, yes, this is one of the missing, or one of the evolutionary, fits between ape and man, and it's like, crazy. Oh my gosh, dude, like crazy. See, that's just, and then we look at evidence of where it would show that sometimes they would bleach certain bones so they would fit together, knowing that these bones didn't really fit together, or they would add part of a jawbone into a human jawbone from somewhere else to make the jaw protrude farther, to say, oh, here's a... And whenever I hear stuff like that, dude, and it happens in Christianity too. I mean, there's people on both sides that do this kind of stuff. I found this thing. Yes. I found the Holy Grail. Right. That's just a cup. But I always think to myself, China, you are not seeking the truth. No. If you are purposely tampering with evidence so it fits your worldview, whether it's for religious reasons or for secular reasons, I mean, come on. Yeah. Right? So anyway, I mean, your response would be macroevolution, there's no evidence for it at all. Right.
And microevolution, there's plenty.
Micro is plenty.
And it's designed that way.
So first you'd have to kind of define the terms with somebody. Said, oh, you Christians don't believe in evolution. You'd have to say, well, no. I believe in microevolution, but not macro. And sometimes you have to explain to them the difference.
Right. And one of the things one of my coworkers asked me was, so you're a Christian, is that you think all the animals went on the ark? And I was like, yes. He's like, so every species of every animal got on the ark? Yeah. And I was like, no.
That was a big ark, man.
Right. with how many species there are, I can imagine like all the varieties.
Yeah, you
They're
probably couldn't even
ridiculous.
fit just the varieties of dogs alone on the ark.
I know.
Let alone all the other animals.
Yeah. And I was like, no, I think there were, some of each type that all came on the ark, all the basics that needed to survive, and God spread them out and God made them adapt to their environments. And he was like, yeah, that makes sense.
Okay.
And so I was like, I think it's an easy to understand argument for someone.
Yeah, for someone who's truly looking at it and wanting to know the answer.
Yeah.
Right. But if someone already has a preconceived, no, I already know that there is no God, and I know that, so if you say something like that, then they say, Christian cop out. What a cop out answer.
Right. Yeah.
What do you mean there was only 2 dogs on the ark, and then you want me to believe all the dogs we have came from those 2 dogs? That's ridiculous. Well, when you look into genetics, it's actually not ridiculous.
Right. It all points towards one type. Yeah.
Right.
And I think that the problem is so many people reject the miraculous because it's miraculous.
Yes.
But it's like, okay, let's do a thought experiment here. Let's come to my side. There is a God.
Right.
The God can do anything. Can God do miracles?
Right.
Yes or no?
Right.
The answer is obviously yes.
Yes.
He can bend time and space to do whatever he wants.
Right.
So why is it that you're not convinced to come to my side because of the miraculous?
Because they don't see him now. That's why.
Right.
They say, well, I've never seen a miracle
now.
Ever. So therefore they don't exist.
Right.
It's like,
and they were rare back then too.
I've never seen a woolly mammoth either. Does that mean I can say that they've never existed?
Right.
Just because you've never seen something doesn't mean it doesn't exist or it never existed.
And it's not as if it's not as if the Bible was like, oh yeah, this happens like daily. This is like miracles happen all the time. And then, for now we just don't see that. We're just like, where's all the miracles? Right.
And you could probably narrow most of them down into the 3 years of Jesus's public ministry, really.
Right.
I mean, you saw them throughout the Old Testament a little bit here and there.
Yeah,
but
it's purposeful, right?
Yes.
It's like miracles aren't just like willy-nilly. They're like, this miracle was for a purpose of convincing people to follow Jesus.
Right.
If miracles happened all the time, then people would just be like, yeah, miracles are normal.
Right.
Right?
Right.
And then they'd be like, well, yeah, miracles happened when Jesus was there, but what's the big deal about that?
Right.
They happen all the time.
Yeah, it would lose, the term miracle wouldn't even mean anything.
Right.
Because miracle denotes something that's out of the ordinary.
Right.
If it was every day, who cares? Right. Yeah, exactly.
And I do think that there are miracles that still happen but people, I think they're less obvious miracles. They're miracles that happen in people's lives,
right,
that are extremely powerful for them and people that know them.
Right.
But for people outside of that, of course, they're not going to go probing into someone's life and be like, well, how did your cancer disappear?
Right.
And it's partly because they're not seeking that. They're not saying, well, are miracles really true? I don't think they are, without actually going out and seeing, hey, well, maybe talk to some people who have experienced miracles,
right,
and like get from them what they think happened, you know?
Right.
If you're going to do that, I think you're going to find some unexplainable miracles that have happened. Whether they're provable or not is another question. Of course, you can't prove that the person's cancer didn't disappear for some other reason, scientific reason, whatever.
Right.
But you can still say, yeah, that was still a miracle for that person, And I think, people complain why doesn't God just show up?
Right.
I believe in God. Why can't I just be like, God, just show me yourself? Because, it's like, well, then everyone would just believe out of fear, right?
Right.
You'd have a God that just showed up all the time and be like, believe me.
Right.
People would be like, okay.
Yeah, but even then people would pass it off as something else.
Oh, yeah.
If they didn't want to believe already, they'd be like, oh, I must be seeing things.
Right.
I better go get my head checked.
But God doesn't want people to follow him because they're just scared into submission, right? They'd be like, oh my gosh, I better believe in this God because he's right there,
right,
and he's gonna kill me if I don't do this. It's not like God's like a mafia boss that's like, I offer you my protection. like, and just going by your house every time, like,
Right.
what are you doing? You loving your neighbor?
Yeah.
If you're not, I'm gonna kill you.
Right.
You know?
Right.
You know,
that
it's
would
like,
almost be forced, right? And that's
right. And
I
then
don't think
people
that's
would be
the
like,
way.
I don't like that God.
Right.
You know, he shows up all the time.
Right.
And makes me feel horrible. You know.
Right.
And it's like, I think God is tactful with how he shows up and when he shows up, and it isn't very often because it's meant to feel special. It's meant to feel like he's only going to come when he's invited to come. Right. He's only going to come into your life when you want him to, because that's the way he wants it to be. Right. He doesn't want to come into people's lives that don't want him in their lives. Like,
Right.
He didn't create people with the purpose of just like convincing them to follow him.
Right.
By like, you know, just showing up. You know.
Yeah. What's that analogy? He leads like a shepherd, and not. What's it say? Oh, I forgot it. Something along those lines. Like he's not gonna, he has every ability to force people into whatever he wants, but he doesn't, you know?
Yeah. So, that's what I would say to non-Christian is like, I think Christianity just makes sense. I think if you really understand what the Bible is about and what it teaches, you will be convinced that it's the right thing, right? You'll feel in your heart, yeah, this is like what I've been missing this whole time.
Right.
So this is what I've been kind of like, it's been in the back of my brain as like, this feels right, this feels right, this feels right.
Right.
Christianity is like all of that stuff coming together into something that just makes sense. Like you just like, oh, that's why when I do this, it feels wrong. And when I do this, it feels right.
Right.
You know, that's why self-sacrifice seems like such a noble thing for people to do, even to non-Christians. Like it, you know, to non-Christians, self-sacrifice doesn't make any sense.
Right.
Right. It's like self-preservation is
what it's all about.
Is what natural selection is all about.
Right.
So they would, if someone was sacrificing themselves to save someone else, they'd be like, why are you doing that? It makes no sense.
Right.
It goes against everything I think that people are driven by, you know?
Right.
But in our hearts, we realize like that's a noble, right thing to do. And it hits us at a deeper level than we're prepared for sometimes.
Right. And that's almost like a Christian, it seems to me anyway, that's a Christian exclusive attitude, right? Like Christ sacrificed himself for us, and the Christian should do the same, right? I mean, it's like, but to where a non-believer might not feel that way, first of all, because they might be uncertain of where they're going. Yeah. You know, but at the same time, like it's that story that you've probably heard about the guy, the Christian and the non-Christian that were in the military together, and they were in the war, and the Christian was witnessing to the non-Christian the whole time about his faith and blah, 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 and the guy didn't buy it, whatever. And then they're in the war, and then they're in the bunker together, and grenade flies into the bunker or whatever, and
he jumps on top,
and the Christian jumps on top of the grenade, kills himself, because he knows where he's going when he dies. He doesn't know where his friend's going. So he thinks to himself, if my friend gets blown up right now, he's probably going to end up in hell. At least if I jump on this, I'll just be in paradise, you know, and then maybe my friend will eventually at some point, I mean, of course there's no guarantee, but maybe eventually before he does die, he'll, and then I'll see him someday, you know?
And of course, like people can point to that and be like, well, Christians are just self-serving. They're just delusional because they're like, oh, I'm going to heaven anyways. Like I can do whatever I want.
Right.
But I think in actuality, in that moment, that person probably wasn't thinking, oh, it's all right, I just go to heaven, I'll be in paradise.
Right.
It's like a genuine, like, I really care about that person.
Yes.
I would do anything for that person, even though it will cost me my life. Right. It has nothing to do with me. Right. And so I think that aspect of Christianity is confusing for people.
Right.
Because it's like, well, how could you care about someone else like
more
that? More than yourself. You got to get something out of it. Right. And, you know, sometimes people are like, well, it's because you think you're going to get rewards in heaven, you know. Right. But like, I don't know. I mean,
well, I guess the reason I worded it that way, because it would be like, let's say that you have doubts about your salvation. Let's say that you believe the Bible's true, you believe that there is a heaven and a hell, and that there is, and we'll end on hell, by the way. We'll do that next, because I know you wanted to talk about that. I forgot. So let's say you believe that there's a heaven and a hell, but you're unsure. I would just think you might be less likely to sacrifice yourself for someone if you think there's a possibility that you might end up in hell for eternity. Right. Like, of course. That's not just like a quick little slap on the wrist and then you're on your way. I mean, that's like, we're talking about eternity there, you know?
Of course, yeah. So, and I would say, let's say Christianity didn't have any promise of heaven or any mention of hell or anything like that.
Okay.
And there was still, if Jesus still said, you know, love your neighbor as yourself, you know, be self-sacrificing for other people, and you do not get heaven, right? Let's just take heaven out of the picture.
Okay.
I still think that Christians would say, I want to sacrifice myself for this other person, even if I'm not getting anything, even if I cease to exist. Right. I think that's a value in Christianity that it only comes from the Holy Spirit to be able to convince people that that's true and good and something they should do. Right. Even if it means you will cease to exist. Yeah. You know, so
I would agree with that for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think it's a bit of a cop out to say, well, okay, you could do that, but he's just going to get into heaven, and that's because he's delusional. You know. Right. It's like no, I think he would do that without heaven even in the picture. I think he would still do that. So. And I think that's what Christ modeled for us, right? He didn't get it. He was already in heaven, came down, died for us while being mocked by everyone. Right. He didn't gain anything, you know? Right. Like, he only gained suffering. So we're to have that same attitude of, despite me not getting anything, despite my suffering, despite all the things that will happen to me, I care about this person. I will do anything for this person. Right. So I think that's something that really speaks to people of that level of self-sacrifice that does not in any way benefit you, is just absolutely mind-blowing for people to think about. Right. So, right. Yeah. Anyways.
Cool. All right, well, let's end on hell, man. That's a good place to
Perfect place to stop.
Yeah, let's make that our last topic of discussion.
All right. So, growing up, I was very confused about hell, right? Because it's like, I have friends that are not Christians, and I think one of the hang-ups was always, if I do all these things wrong, then shouldn't I just be paid back for that? Like let's say, someone does all these crimes and they go to jail for 100 years and they pay for all their crimes. They'd be done, right? It's like, why is hell eternal? Like, why are you being punished forever for something you did on a limited earth? Yeah. Right. And I think that's a really good question. And
it's a great question. That's a hard one.
It's a really hard. Yeah. So that's something I wrestled with for a long time, because I was like, I agree with that. I can't see a reason why God would punish us more than what was necessary for what we did on earth. Like, just see fit to just let us suffer eternally. Right. So I did some research, and I know I have my opinion on this is probably not like a very popular opinion, but I did some research and I came across this book. I can't remember what it's called now. It's like The Eternal Fire, the Consuming Fire, something like that. Highly recommend it. Okay. Basically what the book is.
Do you know who the author is?
No, I don't remember.
Okay.
But basically what the book is it goes through the Bible, through every single place where the Bible mentions death or hell or the grave or anything like that. And it goes through the whole Bible, and it tries to figure out, okay, without our modern understanding of hell and things like that, like what were the authors really meaning by this, right? Like what were the Jewish people at the time reading this? What did they believe about this? What was the main point of this message, right? Right. And you'll see, like, you go through the Bible and there's so many references to, the wicked will become dust. They will go to the grave. You will make them like dust. It compares, it always makes the point that the wicked will get what they deserve by basically just perishing forever. And there's certain verses, especially later in the Bible, like Revelations, where people, I think, take them as a standalone verse, and they say, yeah, that's a pointer to hell. Like it says right there, eternal torture.
Right.
Right. Which it doesn't. And it's very interesting because their point was, okay, well, if our modern understanding is that people go to hell and they're tortured forever, like where did that belief come from? Like how does people start to read that into scripture?
Right. Is it actually scriptural, or is it something that was kind of tweaked from certain verses? Yeah.
And it's very interesting because it goes through, I think it's Plato or another philosopher, I can't remember. But basically the thinking was there's this assumption that everyone has an eternal soul that doesn't die. It just keeps going. Right. And the Bible does not say that. It doesn't say people have an inherent soul that is going to live forever no matter what.
Right.
It's even in the Bible, it says, we are going to be raised up on the last day. Our bodies will be raised up on the last day and we'll live forever with him in eternity. It's not like, oh, our souls are floating around and they're like ethereal and they're just going to last forever. And that's common for all people.
So you're saying that as a Christian, you will live forever, but what you're saying is your soul is not eternal.
Right.
That's what you're saying.
Well,
the
at
soul
least
in and of itself.
The soul could probably, the soul probably exists. I think it does. I'm not sure if it's really in the sense that we think of it now. Because, one of the things I wrestle with is like, okay, when Christians die right now, do they still have a soul in heaven? And then they come back to their bodies on earth? And I've gone back and forth on like whether that's true or not, or whether it's just like we're dead and then we come back alive and then we live forever. Right. Or whether there's like an in-between time where we're in heaven. I don't know. I kind of go back and forth on that. But the question of hell, I think there's only a few verses in the Bible that really point towards eternal torture. And one of them it says eternal punishment.
Right.
And it says the smoke of the fire will burn on forever. Right. But what it doesn't say is the people in that fire are being tortured eternally. And when it says eternal, his point was in the book, eternal does not mean forever. And it doesn't have to mean forever. It can mean it has eternal meaning. You know what I mean? Like it is something that is of the next chapter of humanity. It is something that is going to happen later. That is of the eternal realm, right?
Like segments in time, all within the eternal timeline.
Right. Okay. So his point was like eternal means it might have eternal meaning. It might have meaning that goes on forever, but it doesn't mean the torture lasts forever. His point was like, these people, it says, are thrown into the fiery pit, right? Which, if you weren't going to think about any other thing about hell or anything like that, you would think, well, yeah, that person's just going to burn up and cease to exist.
Right, really quickly.
Right.
As if you end the surface of the sun, you wouldn't last long.
Yeah.
Right.
And if your assumption was their soul isn't going to live on after that, they're just dead.
Right.
And I think looking at the Bible that way and thinking, okay, Christians have made the decision to follow God, and therefore God is inviting them in to live forever. People that aren't Christians have made their choice. They've said, I don't want to be with God forever. God will just destroy them. Like they will cease to exist.
Right. Like the nihilistic viewpoint.
Yeah. And I think it's not very, very common viewpoint.
Seventh-day Adventists hold that viewpoint.
Yeah. I think there's really good evidence to show that that's true.
Well, I can tell you, without having looked into really deeply into anything you're saying, I like that better, right? Like just from a purely personal standpoint, it seems, because I've always struggled with the idea of eternal hell, because as I sit here, and this is where it gets fleshy, because I'm like, I'm not God. I don't know what he knows. I can't do what he does. But if I do, I try to pretend like, okay, if I'm God, and I think of even the people that just, the worst person I can think of, like a rapist, a child molester, or whatever, right? A serial killer. Like I can sit here and think of just a horrible person in my view. And even then I would think to myself, do I want that person punished? Yes. Do I want them to suffer? Absolutely. Do I want them to suffer for eternity? I don't think I do. Yeah. I think I would think to myself, that's a little harsh. That it is. I mean, eternity's a long time, man.
It is.
I mean, it just seems like a long time.
If you even think about Christians living forever in this city of God, right? I mean, think about, let's say you had a best friend on earth that never became a Christian. Right. And you knew this person's in hell suffering. Yeah. For this entire time, I'm having a blast over here.
Right. And they said there's no tears in heaven. Right. Right. Like there's no weep. How can you not be if you know that?
Yeah. If you love your enemies, right, like God commanded you, right, then how could you not be sad all the time if your friend is over there suffering? Right. Right. And I think Revelation is almost, it's supposed to point us towards a finality of that kind of thing, right? It's like, we're going to end this chapter, we're going to start a new chapter. Right. And it's like, the people in heaven are not going to be, they're going to be sad about what happened before. They're going to be sad about, I wish my friend was here. Right. You know, they're going to be sad about things that passed. Right. But they won't be sad about the future. Right? Because the future is bright. The future is perfect with God. Right.
No sin nature, no death, no.
Right. And I think God defeating the grave, or defeating death and sin almost loses its meaning if you say, well, yeah, there's still this prison over there with a bunch of people suffering in there forever. Right. And like, okay, and usually in hell, there's a picture of like, Satan torturing people. It says Satan was thrown into the fire too.
Yeah, it's always presented like he's the ruler of hell or something.
Right, so you're sending him back into hell where he was already at? Like, it makes no sense. Like, right.
Well, I mean, the picture a lot of people paint of hell is wrong anyway. Like, Satan's down there, and all the people that like to sin on earth are down there doing more sin, and it's this big party where there's these drunken orgies everywhere, and Satan's the ringleader, and they're all dancing and having a good time. You know, it's
like, why would God allow that to happen?
Yeah.
Well, why would God allow evil to continue existing? Right. So,
especially when it pleases those people so much. Right. Like, I mean, from a sinful standpoint, it's almost like, yeah, that sounds better than heaven in some ways. Right. Like, if you were just going to go full force into your sin and be like, oh, I enjoy my sin, I enjoy doing these kind of things. You're telling me I can do that for eternity? And there's no punishment and there's no anything. Right. It's just me whooping it up in a party down here.
And I think it's merciful for God to say, like, no, this is the end of the line. You are finished. Right. This chapter is finished. All of these people who decided this, they will be destroyed, and it will start over new. You know, I think I think that view just it's a so much more straightforward read on the Bible, especially the Old Testament, because the Old Testament has zero mention of hell.
Well, it uses words like Gehenna,
and the grave.
Yeah, Tartarus.
But again, like that. If you're a Jewish person, you think of the grave. You don't think, oh, they're in there somewhere suffering. You're like, no, they're just dead. I can see their bones. They're decomposing.
Right.
Like,
their body's dead.
Right. Yeah. I think it just stops there. Like, you don't need to read into it more.
Okay.
So like when God says the wicked will become like dust, I mean, I think the most straightforward read on that is just they're going to be dust.
Just annihilated.
Just annihilated, right?
And you're saying that's body and spirit.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's the thing. Is like, do you really say that those two things are separate? Are you saying your body and your spirit are two separate things? Or are you saying the spirit is like part of your body?
I believe that, and again, I haven't looked into as deep the things you're talking about, but my belief is that I think the soul or the spirit is really who we are. Right. I always think this body is not me. This is like the vehicle that my soul drives around on earth, and then one day it's going to break down. And then when my soul leaves my body, that's what we would call physical death. That's the moment a person physically dies. And this came into play, one of the last ones I did, because we were talking about abortion with someone who's a pro-choice believer, and the question of when does life begin, right? To me, life begins and ends when the soul enters the body and leaves the body. That's the beginning of life and death. And of course, is there any way for us to really know, like, when does the soul enter the body? Is it at conception? Is it sperm to egg? Does it happen then? Does it happen like this person believed that it was at first breath? And I think that's when the soul enters, you know, it's like, who knows, right? So,
and I think that view, the view of when do people get souls? How long does a soul survive? All these things. You can really, if you just say, no, I don't think there is a soul. I think a person is just a person. I think it's just a human.
Right.
It kind of solves all of those issues, right? Because you're like, at conception, well, yeah, that's a human.
Right.
Does it have a soul? Well, I don't really think
it's kind of irrelevant.
I think it's just
what you're saying.
Part of the person, right?
Right.
You know.
But how do you deal with something like a sin nature that dwells within our flesh? And then Paul says things like, "Who will save me from this body of death?" Right. And it's very clear, I think, throughout Scripture that the sin nature is dwelling within the flesh of a person, and then we're told in heaven someday we're going to be without that sin nature.
Well, what I would say is, God created us with bodies, right? That were perfect.
Right.
So the body was a part of us in the first place. It was perfect. It was.
When was it
part of who we are?
You're talking about like Adam and Eve?
Yeah.
Okay, before
Adam
the fall.
And Eve, before the fall.
Not me and you.
Right.
We were born in sin. You believe that?
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. So Adam and Eve were created perfect. They had bodies that God intended them to have forever. Right. And then they made a decision to turn against God.
Blew it for all of us.
And their bodies, their souls, everything about them were corrupted.
Right.
Right. So it's really, I don't know. I think of this thinking of like separating a person out into their sin nature and their true self, good nature is almost a mistake, because it makes people think, this is me, I'm the good person, and then I just have this added on. Like this is the part of me that's not really me.
Right.
So they don't have to take ownership of that.
Right.
Right. You can be like, well, I have sin nature. It's not really part of me.
It can be your cop out, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Versus saying, no, there is no separation in these two things. It's one thing, and I am both good and evil.
Right.
Right. I have good in me. I have bad in me. I make good decisions. I make bad decisions. I think good thoughts. I think bad thoughts. That whole thing is me.
Okay.
Right. I don't like the part of me that is bad. I don't want to continue doing those things.
Well, like Paul in Romans 7.
Right.
Who's talking about, I do what I want to do and I don't do what I don't want to, you know.
Yeah, exactly. So I think there's a humility to that, to say, part of me, myself, my inner being is evil. Like I am sinful. Not just part of me, not just like the mistakes part of me, but like me as a person, I'm sinful. I am caught up in all of this sin that has been passed down to me, that I've made decisions for.
Right.
Things like that. God is going to take that person and he is going to erase the things about me that are sinful and make me into a new person that is with a new body. So that's the thing. It's like,
so he's going to eliminate the evil parts of you.
Right. And he's going to take you and transfer you into the good version of you, right?
Okay.
The good body, the good spirit, all those things. I think to kind of separate those things out is, it gets confusing, and it doesn't really necessarily need to be confusing.
Okay.
It's just to be like, you know, people are like, oh, what's your proof that a person has a soul inside them? And you're like, oh, can you measure it coming out of them when they die? There's all these crazy things.
Right? Yeah, of course.
But like, you could just avoid that entire argument by saying, no, I don't. I think a spirit is a person, is a part of a person, and it dies with that person.
Right.
And
so you believe in a soul. You just think that it's one and the same with the body?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think a person includes their body, their mind, their spirit, whatever that is exactly. All of those things make up a person, and all of those things die with a person.
Okay.
Whether God does some kind of miracle to bring the spirit into heaven temporarily before he brings it back down, I don't know. I'm not exactly sure.
Right.
But I think I just think it simplifies a lot of arguments. I think it's a more straightforward read on the Bible, because especially in the Old Testament, it never talks about, oh, his soul left his body, or like, you know, like his soul was over here and his body was over there. You know, like it's like, you know, people are just people, and their bodies are their bodies, and that's just them. And I think.
So you think that concept was something that was kind of developed more towards the New Testament era?
And, well, after the New Testament.
Okay.
So I think the New Testament had a little bit of that, or not the New Testament itself, but the way people thought around that time,
right?
Because of the philosophers that brought up this concept of eternal souls, because that was really a non-Christian belief back then. Is like, oh, like souls are eternal. They existed before we existed. They existed after we existed, and we're just kind of like I can't remember what the belief is called, but this like rejection of the body as the soul is better than the body, right? Like Paul addresses that.
Yeah, I forgot the name too. Yeah, there's a name for it.
I can't remember exactly what it is. Gnosticism or something?
Well, it was a form of Gnosticism, but then there was those that were trying to claim that Jesus didn't have a physical body because the body was evil,
right?
And he wasn't evil. So try to claim that he had like a spirit body or something.
Right. So some of that was already there and kind of changing the way people thought about it before, and then it got kind of cemented the more the philosophers kind of came up with these ideas to explain things, that they kind of got into Christianity. That's at least what I believe is if you ignore everything else the world says, everything else all the philosophers say, and you just look at the Bible, I think it's fairly obvious that it's just bodies are bodies, people are people. Yeah. Like people die, they die. I mean, and I think if you look at like the Jewish faith, I would say they would also believe that, like. Maybe not modern day Jewish people, because they've picked up on a lot of other stuff and kind of put it in. But Jewish people, at least at that time, you don't really see any mention of heaven or hell. Right. You only see things about the here and now, the body, you know, what's happening now and what will happen in the future. Right. Like God will redeem these things by doing these things in the future. You know, actual events, not something in heaven. Yeah. Not something like outside of what we would think of, but just like there was no need to think more into things and create hell or heaven.
Yeah, that's something I'm definitely looking into. I'm gonna try to find that book.
Yeah, I could look it up after we're done here.
Find that, yeah, because there were quite a few years back. There was a book called Love Wins by Rob Bell. That was a big phenomenon in Christian circles, and the claim was that's what he was teaching. Probably not to the depth that you're. I mean, I know it's not to the depth you're talking about because I read the book. But everybody was saying that they liked it because he's showing that hell is not a real place. It's not eternal, right? There was this whole thing. And of course, to someone who struggles with the concept of eternal hell, that sounds good, right? It's like, oh, this guy's going to show me that the Bible teaches otherwise. You know, that's almost kind of a good thing in a sense, if that is what the Bible's teaching. Obviously, if the Bible teaches that there is an eternal hell, then that's what we need to adopt, right? But I read the book and I was sorely disappointed, you know, but I knew a lot of Christians, this is great. It's, you know, but of course they were looking for that to such a degree that they were wanting that to be the case. But I mean, the guy he hardly used any scripture. And when he did, it was totally out of context, not even close in context. I was like, dude, really, this is what you're, and then after I read it, I sat back just like totally shocked that so many Christians were buying into it. I'm like, guys, that's not what very clearly this is not what the scripture is saying here, yet he's making you think it is, you know. And it was like, but yeah, so I'll definitely once you get the title and the author to that, let me know. I'll see if I can. I'm sure I won't be able to find it like at the library. It's probably too obscure, but I might be able to find it on Amazon or something.
And I would say this book is very much the opposite of that. It's like
A lot of scriptures used.
Lots of scriptures.
Okay.
They literally go through the entire Bible every single time it's mentioned.
Oh, nice.
You know, like it's extremely thorough. So
right.
you know, it's very interesting. And,
cool, man. I'll check it out. Yeah. Awesome. Well, thanks, man. This has been kind of cool because it's kind of cool because I've known you for a long time, right? As being, you know, the drummer and the guy who sits in front of me in church and all this stuff, but never really got to talk to you about this kind of stuff. It was kind of cool.
Yeah,
so
that's cool.
Appreciate it, man. Good stuff. So we will call that a wrap, even though none of us rapped, unfortunately. We didn't even talk about rap.
No, I don't like rap.
You don't like rap at all?
Oh, that's not true. There's some rap that I like.
Yeah. You look like a
Depends on the
heavy
lyrics.
D kind of guy. Thank you so much for listening to this episode. If you haven't yet, please subscribe. Also, I am interested in your feedback. You can contact me at whycan'twetalkaboutThat@proton.me. If you would like to join the conversation, please join the Why Can't We Talk About That Facebook group. And one last thing. Since the recording of this episode, Colby and his friend Greg have created and released an extremely fun card game called Corpse Cat. It is a simple luck-based game that's good for small and large groups. It also has some morbid but lighthearted humor about dead cats. My family and I have really enjoyed playing it, and I think you will too. You can get more info on that at wtboardgames.com. Now here's a clip from next week's episode.
One day, I'm sitting in my room, sober, not drinking, not doing drugs, no nothing, and I had my window open, and a pair, not a full bird, but a pair of black wings from a bird flew into my room and landed right in front of my couch.
Just the wings.
Just the wings.
Okay.
And it scared the crap out of me. Like it was.
Imagine.
It was so shocking. But that wasn't even the beginning.
Yeah.
I had a poster that was like psychedelic. It was a Manson poster, but it wasn't Manson. It was more of like a shape of like almost like the devil kind of, but not really. It was just all psychedelic. Well, and it was in the back of me, and I heard a voice. It made sense. It was speaking, but it wasn't like you and I are talking. And it started speaking to me, and it was telling me that it wanted my soul.
Wow.
And I heard it, and I looked over, and I saw that it was like a demon. And it wasn't a demon. It was bigger than that.
Right.
It was more than that.